Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Growth to Greatness podcast. I am here with my dear friend, Zechariah Cesani from Ave Lux Gym. What is going on,
What's up,
brother? Dude? We finally got a chance to do this.
Yes.
I'm so happy. On location. I've been dying to interview you. I've been dying to speak with you about your journey. We talked briefly off camera, and you told me just a little bit about what you do. But before we jump into the now, as I always do, we're going to go and take it all the way back.
Sounds great.
So, Zach, tell me a little bit about your childhood. Go way back and your upbringing, whatever you can remember, and talk about it from maybe an entrepreneurial lens. I'm looking to surface some moments that maybe led you to, who you are today.
Sure.
Go as far back as you want.
Cool. Well, first of all, appreciate you bringing me on.
Yeah.
This is a privilege. Been looking forward to this been looking forward to this for a long time.
Yeah.
And this is welcome to the arena,
Yeah, it is
this
the arena.
A fortress for the kingdom, as we call it.
Yes.
And so let's talk about childhood, man. First 5 years of my life, I grew up in the back of a minivan.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting. My mom is, technically her family is from North Korea. All right. Her grandfather grew up in that time frame during the war, and we were saved by the U.S. He was in the peninsula when that happened and adopted by the military. And from the military, that's when he came to the United States. And so she was 9 years old when she came over and to the United States and moved to Jersey, New York. My dad's dad, very similar, Vietnam War. So he came back in, and I bring this up just because it kind of gets some preference around the mindset and the discipline and the structure and all these things you talk about entrepreneurial really came from a time of struggle. And my dad's dad, same thing. So he came from military as well. And he's from Jersey, New York type of area and stuff like that. Okay. And so they met there. And but my mom, when she went to school, her whole thing was that, go to school, get a good education, get good grades, get into a good college, get a good job, save up some money and one day retire, right? The American dream. Yeah. And so my dad was more on the entrepreneurial side. He kind of liked to rock the boat a little bit. Okay. I love that about him. And so that's where you have the side of, hey, education is extremely important, right? And I think that's a key element to an entrepreneurship is education, but also you have the entrepreneurial side of like thinking outside of the box in creative ways and making things happen. And so you combine those two together with military backgrounds and you have a very disciplined household. And it's been a lot of fun. And so my mom and dad decided to have kids very early. And because of that, my dad, he barely graduated high school. I think he got his GED. My mom was pretty much going to go to Penn State for honors, and she decided to have a family instead. And so when I tell you we started from nothing, I mean like below the poverty line for sure. And so for the first 5 years, I'm one of four, just as a reminder. So I'm the youngest of four. I'm 31. Now I have two older brothers who are twins. They're 32. My oldest brother is 33. And so they banged them right out.
One. Boom, boom, boom. Wow.
Just like that.
Okay.
Yeah. And so very competitive household, all boys, right?
Yes.
And so when we were about 5 years old, my mom and dad, we bounced around in different houses and stuff like that. Those first 5 years, we didn't really have a place to stay, if I could put it that way. Yeah. And moved to Tampa, which is an crazy, crazy story, but maybe we'll go down that path if we get there. Okay. Insane. But so we moved to Tampa when I was 5 years old, and we lived with other people until we can finally my parents can finally afford their first apartment. And so that's when I was about 5, 6 years old, 7 years old. And it was tough, man. Mom and dad, I watched them work 3 jobs both. My dad also served at the church as well, and he put in about 20 to 30 hours there, separate from the 3 jobs. They had 3 kids with no education. And so they were trying to make it. And I remember the van that we lived in, my dad corrected me. I thought it was a Mazda. It's actually a Chrysler. And we lived in a Chrysler. And I remember when I was, one of the biggest memories, or the first memories I have, I know exactly where I was in Tampa. It was like 7 a.m. in the morning. And so you have the 2 front seats, my mom and dad. And you have the bench, which my 3 brothers are sleeping on top of each other. And then you have me in the back, and I'm in the back row. There's not really a bench. It was kind of just like back there. And I remember popping my head up over the bench and seeing my mom and dad. And at the time, I didn't really understand. And many years later, I come to realize that, one, I woke up because my parents were arguing. And they were arguing about finances, rightfully so. We slept in a van. That's just our lives. Yeah. And so I'm very thankful for what I can't imagine what my parents have sacrificed. If I think about it, it really makes me mad emotional because I can't imagine doing 3 jobs and having all these things at once. not having the easiest upbringing with their parents and stuff like that, having to figure everything out on their own. But all I saw was my parents grind. All I saw was my parents just figure it out. You know, my parents did a great job at bringing us up, in my opinion, giving us structure and how to survive and be disciplined and make sure, you know, you have proper etiquette. Your teeth is always brushed, you know, your hair is always combed, everything is to a T, right? And so presentation is extremely important, and you represent our family everywhere you go. And they taught us all these principles growing up. I'm super thankful that, you know, my parents probably didn't grow up with, right? And from previous conversation with them, actually they didn't, but they saw these things that they wanted to see implemented into their family moving forward. And so they had to overcome a lot, and I consider them what I call generational changers. Someone down the line, generational curses all the way down the family tree until it met me. And that's where my parents really started to declare war on living a different life, partially why we moved away from Paterson, New Jersey, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, I know Jersey.
Carteret. Yeah, I know you do. So it's I know that very well. The advice I have there, get out.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
don't
whatever
stay.
you have
whatever you
to
do, get the heck out, right?
Yeah.
And so my parents are heroes in that regard. You know, they sacrificed everything. It was not perfect. They didn't teach us how to love ourselves. They didn't teach us grace and all these other things. They did tell us they love us a lot, and they did show it in their own way. But there was quite a bit of a disconnect, which, in my opinion, was and I've come to learn to about 30 years old, I'm 31 now, is that in regards to in regards to entrepreneurship, one of the greatest things that my dad, more particularly being a man to man, that he brought to the table for me was all his deficiencies. And those deficiencies, believe it or not, are the dragons. So I'll say it this way. The things that he did not overcome before he had children, his children immediately inherited. The dragons you don't slay, your children inherit. The sad part about that is I get the back end of that. So I get the insecurities that he deals with, the guilt and shame of not being perfect, which no one is, plus his background, everything else, and then everything moving forward, the complications of life, etc. However, right, now 30 years old, I'm looking at it from a very different perspective now. I'm learning to look at a different perspective, not because I'm great, but because I've been humbled so many times. And now I have a better understanding of who they are, and based on the things I'm experiencing in my life. And I say all that because now it's very different. I'm so thankful because my dad he identified the dragons I do need to slay. I'm very thankful that I had a father. He is the generational changer. But the generational changer from having no fathers for generations and dealing with all sorts of, let's just say, craziness growing up, to where we are today, it may take a few generations to live that. I want my kids to live this fulfilled, nurtured, beautiful, incredible life. It may take a few generations to do that, but we're all a part of that process. And if it wasn't for him, it wasn't for my mom, I would not be here. Physically, I would not be here. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there's purpose to our pain.
Yeah.
Right? Don't waste your pain. You know, people see us, especially as entrepreneurs, desperately try to move forward. And it's a very scary place to be. But there's purpose to our plan. Don't wait. What the quote goes something along the lines of this. I was a part of a leadership forum, education system, if I could put it that way, for entrepreneurship.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was sitting at a conference at a very desperate time in my life. Financially, it was insane. And somehow I got up there and I'm sitting there and he says, I'm forgetting the quote, but something on the lines of like, your desperation is someone else's inspiration. Don't waste your pain.
Yeah.
I saw that my whole life with my family.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful. Right. So that kind of right about 5, 6, 7 years old, crazy stuff still went down. Lights were turned off. My parents made it a game. They would click on lights and they play hide and seek. And all 4 of us would be huddled in the bathroom and they take pictures and they would laugh and they made it enjoyable. But those are the realities of the situations, right? There's times where we grew up on government cheese, you know?
Yeah.
We understand what it's like to serve at a church that fed hundreds of thousands of people around the world, specifically there tens of thousands.
Yeah.
And then that Christmas, even though we're serving, you would almost assume that if we're serving, they're in a lower position and we're in an upper position in some regard, socially, financially, to then receive the same gifts that you're giving to them, and you receive the same because you realize when you're 9 years old, my parents don't have the money either.
Right.
We're actually in the same exact situation. It was very humbling to see my parents and their eyes to say, I can see my mom's eyes, bro. It was crazy. 9 years old, my mom giving me this gift, and I'm sitting there and I looked at her and I saw her, when she gave it to me, hoping that what I'm receiving, I receive it well, that it's enough, that I still think well of my parents. She wants the best for me, all those things. Very challenging for a 9-year-old to say, I was just giving this to somebody else who literally is homeless, who's younger than I am, and I'm receiving the same thing. I remember making these connections in my mind to really look at the reality of the situation, but my parents hid that stuff from us. And so that's the beginning of the entrepreneurship, 6, 7, 8 years old, and we continue, and I can continue to go on if you like me to. But I mean, that was just like the beginning ages. That was between 0 and like probably 6, 7 years old.
Yeah.
And then it just continued.
Yeah. First off, thank you for sharing all that. That was, I saw you holding your tears back a little bit. I can only imagine. And I know what it's like to be on the government cheese. I mean, we, family coming out of Russia, food stamps, the whole thing. It was it's hell. One of the things that I want to surface from that for everybody watching is you said that it started to put you on that path. Of course, you didn't know it yet. Out of the experience, what is the number one thing you would say that really would hit home? If you forget everything, what's the one thing that people should keep in mind in their toughest, darkest moments based on what you went through? What would you say?
Your greatest struggle would be your greatest victory.
Your greatest struggle would be your greatest victory.
Napoleon Hill.
Yeah.
1939, Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, very much.
The story, and he talks about it in his book, how he created it, the whole book.
Yeah.
It's actually 12 different books, or like more than that, and then he had to get it down to one.
Yeah.
It's insane. And it's one of the biggest things I took away from that book as a little nugget. I call it little nuggets, like golden nuggets. Like life is like a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
You have this, chest barrel, and you're going in, you're taking all these little nuggets and information and wisdom, conversations like these, good connections, little nuggets. You accumulate these jewels and you pass it on to the next generation. And one of the things that I got from, that I learned from Think and Grow Rich was, within all of us, or within every adversity, is it equal or greater benefit if you have, within every adversity is the seed of equal or greater benefit if you have a positive mental attitude.
Yeah.
The key word was if. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing is that, I call it the depths, right? When you're going through, if I may, the shit,
Yeah.
right, of life,
Yeah, you may.
just the hell of life.
Yeah.
And when you're down there, man, it's chaos. It's hell on earth. And believe it or not, side note, if you hang around the depths long enough, you'll actually realize, even at rock bottom, there's actually a door, a latch that goes a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
And then it's a raid,
door
right? Then it's like,
deeper.
all right, now we're all in here, right?
Yeah.
So I was there for a little while.
Yeah.
Came up from the depths. But
Yeah.
what I'll say is this, is that whatever you learn, the tools that you acquire, skill sets, as Robert Kiyosaki would say, as you're coming out of the depths, guess what? No one can take it from you.
Yeah.
That's yours to keep.
Yes.
Self-respect.
It seems like you reference a lot of different books. Reading is probably important to you,
Hate it.
but you do it.
I love to learn.
Yeah.
Hate reading.
Hate to read.
Hate reading.
Yes.
Because it requires me, and it taught me, which is a good thing,
Yeah.
to time prioritization agenda.
Yes.
Listening is passive. There's nothing wrong with listening. We're doing a podcast today. It's great. It's a great resource and tool, especially in a busy world. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Reading, however, is a whole different thing. Reading teaches us you have to space out time.
Yeah.
You have to have unbroken focus for 9 minutes so you can tap into that flow. When I read, I don't read to just read. I read to comprehend. So I'm writing notes and highlighting. I go back the following day.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, now you accumulate this information. It's not knowledge is power, in my opinion. It's application of knowledge is power.
Yes.
And so taking your time to read that night, let it download subconsciously, and you wake back up, you apply it to your life, and then you see the value of it. You go back to the thing that gave you value. For me, it's books.
Yeah.
And so, sure, I can't say a book has changed my life. However, the application of the information that applied to my life in that very moment, that in and of itself, for me, is value, right? So I do read a lot. Hate it. Love to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you were growing up, and I do want to continue, so 7, 8, 9 years old.
Sure.
As you were growing up, were you introduced to learning, to reading, to all these things by your family, or is this something you learned later on? Or
My parents pushed me in that direction.
Okay.
But just didn't.
No.
It wasn't my thing.
No, I was
a
really
Walter
lazy
Hart guy.
growing up, so I can tell you I didn't do shit growing
I read
up.
one
My
book
mom
and-
was very worried about me. She was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. I don't know what you're going to end up doing, honestly. Yeah, sometimes she tears up on the phone. It's like, I can't believe you actually figured it out,
I
you
know.
know.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know the depths that you have to go to. Side note, really irritating to see social media, really irritating to see content that dilutes the reality. And I use that term very loosely, highly against it. And I think that if we even knew how far we had to go to get through, to get to even, and right now we're still in the journey. We're still doing it. We're not even where we want to be. I don't think we'll ever be. But how far you have to go to even stand anything up. And when you look at what people are saying and the shortcuts and here, take this course and do this thing. And I'm not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying that there's a lot of this misinformation and a lot of dilution into cutting the grind. And as your story unfolds here, and for everybody watching, you cannot skip the grind. You cannot skip the berry to the bottom. It's going to test everything. It's going to take everything from you and of you to do it.
100%.
100%,
I couldn't
right?
agree with that more.
I always talk about this on every episode because people need to know this is not work-life balance. This is not
Such a lie.
This is not going to be like, it's important to some people.
Yeah.
But if you want to go to that place where people don't like you, people don't understand you, even your family's telling you, what are you doing? Go get a job, this and that, then you've arrived. You've arrived in that place where you can finally begin the path. But you have to get to that point, and I think you agree with that as well.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Before you continue, your father, he mentored you a lot, you mentioned?
Yes. Yeah, he's my number one coach.
How did that go? Tell me a little bit about the mentorship. At he sit you down? Was it, nighttime stories? Like we all have it. What was his approach? I'm curious.
So, that's hilarious. At least to me it was. 'Cause I look back on it now, I'm like, it's hilarious.
I can't wait to hear it.
It was, I was about 14, 15 years old, about to go into high school, and my behavior started to change a little bit. By the way, first to fifth grade, I had 36 referrals. Are you familiar with referrals? Referrals is when you go sent to the principal's office and you get written up.
Oh,
and it's like a
write-ups.
major thing. Yeah,
Oh.
write-ups, and you get disciplined, and you get 3 of those. You get in-school suspension, you get another one, you get out-school suspension, then you get expelled.
Whoa.
So I had 36, and
Okay.
that included a lot of, let's call it disciplinary action. And military parents, baby. I love it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
been fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so well deserved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kidding. I'm just messing. But yeah, it was very interesting. My dad, when I was about 14, 15 years old, things started to change, and it was because of my association. It did change the standards that I had to uphold as well, and so therefore my behavior changed. And so my dad was like, "Hey, Zach, growing up, you were like what we call the project." I'm like, the project? I'm like, the heck is that mean, right? I'm like, is that good or bad? He goes, well, he said it like this. He's like, well, you're like the project kid. I'm like, what the heck? I'm like, what is that?
Test stuff on you.
Yeah. I was like, bro, I'm like, what does that mean?
Test theories
He goes,
on
well,
you.
here's the thing. Yeah, exactly. He goes, and I'm the youngest, which is interesting.
Yeah,
And he goes,
yeah.
okay, so either you go really good in one direction, and it's awesome, you make us proud, we're the best parents, oh my gosh, he makes us sound so good. And you go the opposite direction, and not so great, right? And
Yeah.
so he said, here that project, and we had to navigate you. And so his whole thing was like, hey, how do we put purpose and channel that passion, right? And channel that energy in 100% one direction and not the other, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just an absolute roller coaster, right?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the conversation there. And I remember from that point, around that time and that point moving forward, probably the conversation that made one of the biggest impacts in my life was my dad and I were sitting out out by the driveway. We're getting eaten up by mosquitoes, but we're in deep talk and stuff like that. And my dad, I remember saying, he said, son, if you look at the trajectory, and I'm starting to ask questions, right? So about 14, 15 years old, starting to get a little bit of trust there, where I'm starting to really let him in the sense that the direction of my life, and really we start owning, or start really, nurturing that, not just son and father, but
Man to
now
man.
it's man-to-man conversations, mentorship, protege type of situation. And, he said, son, if you look back on your life and you see where you got today, just by looking back, how did you get here? Okay. And you go back to that step behind you, and then, well, how did you get there? And how did you get there? And you start to connect the dots, as he said. He says, you'll notice a pattern. There's a correlation in your life to where you got today, and therefore you can then see the trajectory of where you're going based on the pattern. And you can choose left or right, stop, slow down, I'm doing the right thing, I'm doing the wrong thing, etc. And you'll be guided through the process. And so that, for me, really started to set the stage for truly personal development, because around this time I already started working out. My fitness journey was, I weighed 76 pounds, I was 4'9", and then in 3 years I doubled my weight.
Okay.
Straight personal, just
How
working
old were
out
you
like
at this
crazy.
point?
I was 12 years old when I started working out.
12.
12.
Okay.
I was 76 pounds at 12 years old. I was itty bitty, real tiny.
Yeah.
And then I doubled my weight in 3 years. And in between that time frame, I started seeing these patterns, per se, because I was ready for the conversation, because I had to experience it myself. And then I can relate the information of what I experienced and what he was saying and connect the dots and say, wow, there's a parallel here. There's a correlation. And now I had something to stick it with, right? And so stick the information to it and build on top of that. And so through the progression of starting to train and stuff, then I started to notice these patterns, and I started to implement them and maximize them. Today I know them as success principles, or universal principles, if I may.
Your own?
I would say common denominators that I see not only with myself, but almost from a non-biased perspective. I'm observing the laws that are stated already in the universe, that are already here.
Yeah.
And then we utilize them and maximize them. And what we do as personal trainers, and really educators and coaches, however you want to call it, is we take what people are already doing. And like, for example, if someone is really successful in business, but maybe not into their health, well, you already have discipline. We're going to just reallocate that skill set that you've developed in the direction of the physical realm. So I will use, if it's business, for example, just an easy example, I'm not like some, financial literacy guru, but I'll use some financial terms for them to understand how they built their business by getting to know them better, to correlate it to what they're currently doing to move themselves forward. And then when they start to click in their mind, they go, oh, I see the connection. Wow, I'm really actually good at what I do. I'm just reallocating my resources. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where that's where I mean my universal principles. This applies to everyone, not specific just to someone. They're already in play, right, at all times. It's like,
how do you leverage them? It's the leveraging of these principles is the most important piece. Understanding and leveraging, yes.
And a lot of times it's, and this is just me, I think it's, and I learned this from a friend of mine who's not from this country, and he said the United States in particular, he says that the Western world is more on the side of always doing things in terms of like financial prosperity, and I get that, and I'm all 100% on board with that, actually. But he says that some of these laws in other countries, the same law is used in other realms as well. And so today I understand this as the laws of prosperity. All right, laws of prosperity, in my understanding from the book that I read every morning, is that there's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social. Social ties to financial. We understand things as a financial. That's more of a superficial route. Yeah. But if you learn things in business, per se, then you can say, hey, there's a couple of things that I did here that got me to where I am. So there's fruit on the tree. There's evidence of, if I apply myself in these specific principles every day, disciplines, habits, whatever, rules that you live by, standards, etc., it'll produce a specific result. Well, now if we produced finances, but it sacrificed our relationships, well, the principles are the same. How do I reallocate and start applying it to relationships, right? Because that's the social aspect. And then when, as you know, you focus on the relationship, it would produce the income. But we had to find out for ourselves, and we had to reverse engineer that. We had to first learn by maybe not doing great things or making decisions that we look back on and said, I would have done it differently. Yeah. And now that we know it differently, by treating the customer or whoever it may be that you're dealing with better, then because you're long-term invested into the individual, then the finances come on the back end through miraculous ways from different directions, et cetera.
Yes. I want to address that because I think you surfaced something really important. On the path to gaining, you will lose so much. And I think that's important for a lot of people to realize. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you look back and you said, yes, I would have done this differently because this work I sacrificed my relationship, let's say with my partner, whoever, for this thing. You can then understand that you can work backwards, understand what you did, how you did it, and then as you move forward, make sure to fix that.
Sure.
But without losing, you cannot gain. And that's the unfortunate sacrifice that you're going to have to go through, that we all have to go through that journey. And I love how you position that, because I think a lot of people want to be perfect and want to try to avoid making those mistakes and those failures. And what they don't realize, and what I think you will speak to today some more, I'm sure, are the everlasting, consistent failures that will come again and again and again. Like, everybody knows Mike Tyson is the greatest boxer of all time. Controversial, but he would say so. Okay,
I think so.
I think he would say so.
Or rip your head off.
But or ear, whatever.
Or whatever.
But and what a great man he is now. And I listen to him. If you don't listen to some of his stuff, I couldn't believe the stuff that was coming out of his mouth. Yeah. He talks a lot about fear, which I love. But what I love about Mike Tyson is you don't know about his knockout. You don't know about the times he got knocked out. Yeah. He got knocked out quite a bit. Yeah. He is not a perfect boxer, but he's still the greatest. You know, it's not about the misses. It's about, can you miss long enough to hit, right? And I think that is the part of the training that we all go through is, in my opinion, and maybe you'll agree with this, is as entrepreneurs, as founders, our resilience to pain and failure, not avoidance, resilience. Because avoidance is, you're done. Resilience is what gets you to last to the success. It's, can you last to the finish line? Because the finish line, if clear, will always be achieved if you can last long enough. And I use the word always because most people simply don't last long enough. They don't pivot. They don't move. And it might not be exactly what you thought it was, but at the same time, you made it.
Right.
And I think coming from a military family and having that discipline is at the core foundation for you of completing.
Right.
You're completion driven, right? And I'm assuming that, but
a little bit more result oriented for
result
sure. Result
oriented.
By the environment that I grew up in,
yes.
Et cetera. And so it applied very well, and I'm very thankful for that. It did not come without a lot of pain, a lot of unwiring, a lot of trauma, a lot of therapy, a lot of working out.
Yeah.
A lot of that. So
and I want to talk about, okay, so I'm trying to remember all the things because there's so much. This might be a longer episode.
Yeah.
All right. So
there's a lot of things I want to say.
We were talking about the conversation that you were ready for with your father, but before you hit that, you worked out for 3 years and you doubled your weight. You cannot just breeze by that shit and me not question what that was, because that right there, you basically doubled your assets. If you want to look at business in the simplest way, you dedicated 3 years of your life and you doubled your weight. You hit that target. That right there is you are the business. You worked on yourself and you did it. Tell me about that process, because we're in a pandemic of obesity in this country.
Yeah.
Our food is poisonous, most of it.
Yeah.
The fitness, health, wellness industry is as corrupt as it's ever been. Tell me about your process and speak to that a little bit.
Sure.
And how you got through all that.
I guess it's that process of slowing down to speed up.
Yeah.
That's probably the more gracious side of saying it. It's the same thing coming from the depths to, rising up. Struggle is your victory. It almost implies that where was Zach mentally and emotionally, even spiritually, obviously physically, to be in a deficit that low?
Why were you there to start with?
To then produce that
result.
So the why is quite key.
Okay.
And it comes from a feeling of insufficiency, insecurity.
Okay.
Right? My whole life growing up, I was the youngest of the four, very competitive nature.
Yeah.
And it was, my parents, they're my heroes. It was a very, transactional in the beginning, in terms of love. They're
Talk
working
a little bit more about that. Yeah.
My parents are working really hard. They're doing everything that they possibly can.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the amount of stress, but they're going through it, and they're still being parents to us. And so all they ask is make sure that I did my homework so I can get good grades.
Got it.
And so it was very competitive in the sense of, oh, you did your homework? Oh my gosh, thank God, because that's what I'm working towards, what I'm doing for you to provide that life. Thank you for doing that. Oh my gosh. And we got affirmation from that. So it's not wrong, but it was the only attention that I felt like in my life growing up that I received, that I understood, even though I'm sure on their end it was very different, but that's just what I received. And so it's very transactional. And so it gets to a point where you're in a very competitive household now. You're now battling for attention. And so
for the transaction.
for the transaction. And so it was a very transactional love, right? And not always that way, and I look back on it now and it wasn't. My dad was he wasn't heavy-handed. He was heavy-hearted. I learned to forgive him because I could see his heart now. Then, not so much. Because when you didn't perform, there were repercussions.
Yeah.
Very competitive. And now you're at attention at all times. Your nervous system, you're not emotionally safe. So it got to a point where not even in the household I wasn't emotionally safe, but also even in life, I have 3 older brothers who are very competitive, and they had their own insecurities as well. And so we were rough to each other. I mean, it was rough, man. I had broken bones. Like, it was rough.
Really?
Yeah, it was nuts.
Wow.
So it was pretty wild.
Just to win? To get the attention?
You got 4 adrenaline pumped little mini testosterone boys running around, very competitive in that environment. It was pretty
intense. And when you know what your reward system's built on these things, you'll do anything.
Very competitive. And so it got to a point where I was sick and tired of being 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 sick and tired. Because it's similar to other people, and the opposite spectrum is getting ready to get ready. To get ready, right? You know what I'm saying? We've all been there. We've all been there.
Yeah.
People today listening, I'm going to be listening to
100%.
this in a month, and I'm like, that's me now. Like, why? It's like I haven't learned any different, right?
Yeah.
But the point being is that I was sick and tired of being the weakest. Like that became my identity because I didn't have an identity. And someone who didn't have an identity themselves because they were so hurt and fractured and shattered gave me my identity. And I believed the lies that what I call it, the lies that bind. And so I believed that I was too skinny. I was too weak. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't tall enough. I was a lighter skin than my brothers. They call me the white leprechaun. They're all dark and Hispanic looking. It's very interesting. And I'm very white, different colored. So like everything we can talk about in terms of tearing someone down. Yeah. Right. And when you're brothers, you talk smack to each other.
You talk a bunch.
I edged them on tenfold. I've done things that are much worse than they've actually done to me.
Yeah,
so it's like
you're an instigator type.
Oh, well, yeah, 100%. When you're the small, and here's the thing though, the evidence of is I was lighter. Yeah. I was weaker. I was smaller. I didn't have the education that they were because they were older than me. And all I was surrounded was evidence of my insecurities, evidence of being insufficient. And so people, it's so funny because I talked about my business partner. His story is incredible, right? How he came from and where he came from and all this other stuff. And it's like people are inspired by that story, When we talk about my story, it's more of a place, and I'm just being honest, I'm like, it's a place of insufficiency. And so that's what drove me to double my weight because you know what? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of being bullied. I'm sick and tired of getting beaten up. I'm sick and tired of, I had dealt with a lot of racism growing up. Holy crap, expelled from so many schools from racism. You know what I'm saying? So no matter what, I was never enough. I was an outcast my entire life. And so I was not emotionally stable. I was not mentally stable. I was none of that, right?
Were you aware at all of
zero
any
awareness?
Of this? Zero awareness.
To 18, zero awareness. I remember the day I became aware, which is, this is a wild story. That's insane. But
wait a minute.
Wait,
I know.
But back on track.
Yes,
on track is that I was unaware. And so all I saw was rage. And so I was very reactive and not responsive because my household was very reactive. It was boom, boom. Like there was no thinking and how to articulate and use people. There was none of that. It was you're defensive, right? Yeah. And so that's the environment that I grew up in, right? And so I started working out. And I started going to the gym. So I would run to the gym. It's 3/4 of a mile. I would start working out for about 3 hours. Now, here's how dumb I am. You ready for this? You want to talk about injuries and how I got to where I am today? I would warm up with biceps, the same bicep workout I would do every single day, even if I was training legs. Even if I was training legs. I'm like, hey, man, I'm going to hit legs.
What?
And remember we talked about the little mini thing that we're talking about here? Okay. Yeah. We called that Mount Cesani when I was a kid. I was 76 pounds with a little baby Mount Cesani.
That is
My
so
friends were
funny,
awesome, and they made me feel great about myself, right? And it was super tiny. I was like itty bitty. It was hilarious. I had such a deficiency, bro. It was hilarious. But the point being is that I started working out. So it was a 3-hour workout, and then I would usually eat. I would go to the pool that was there. By the way, my parents worked their butts off to be able to live the lifestyle that we did. Eventually, we got out of living literally like just not so great to a better neighborhood and stuff like that. And 12 years old, we started moving.
12, 13?
4th grade is when we moved.
Okay.
And so then, I was very thankful, and they broke through barriers. It was the first household that actually bought their own home on both sides of their family, like generationally in the United States, like major stuff, right? Man. And so I was able to run to the gym. I'd work out for 3 hours. Then I'd go to the pool, and I'd usually do a whole bunch of laps. And then at nighttime, which is pretty cool, we would do one of three things. we would play football, we would play futsal, right? Soccer, like on the hockey courts, right? Or we played basketball. And basketball, we would be 3-on-3, 5-on-5, whatever. And again, I'm itty bitty, so these guys would destroy me. But you'd still play because you can competitive. You're with the guys,
you
right?
Play,
football, same thing, got destroyed. But I was fast, so real competitive. But my favorite was soccer. Because what happened was that you had a whole bunch of Colombians, you had a whole bunch of Brazilians, you had a whole bunch of students from Germany, from USF, right? University of South Florida, all these interns from the UK, and it would literally be country versus country. And you would play 3-on-3, 5-on-5, and we would play for hours. Dude, I'm talking like 3 hours straight, just round after round after round, and we would play. And me being a mutt, and not that great, I was kind of the guy on the field who's like, if someone was tired, they'd let me on. You know
right.
And I was just kicking everybody and stuff like that. It was just destructive, right? But I was out there. It was fun.
That's cool.
And you end up eventually get kind of good with it and stuff. But then I would run home. And so eventually either run or bike. And so that was one element of how I doubled my weight. And that was a lot of fun. The other one, which was probably the one that I look back on the most, that was I don't know, for me, it was overcoming, I don't know, it was just on my own. I'm bored and I want a challenge, and I'm kind of just bored. And so I get on my bike and I throw in my headphones, right? And I grew up with a lot of trance, techno. Actually, I grew up with Christian music, opera, and techno. Those are the three things I grew up with. I wasn't allowed to listen to Britney Spears, NSYNC. My parents were not allowed us to listen to that. Especially Russian, 100%. Yeah. So
DI.FM, it's still...
Bro, there you go.
That was like...
That's what's up.
That was the thing. That was the only...
Bass Hunter, all those guys. Yeah, it's the
best.
So much fun. So I would listen to that stuff and break beats, all that stuff. So I would be on the bike, and we lived on a golf course, and the golf course was pitch black at night. And so you would only get street lights when you go from one hole to the next. You go all the way through, navigating all the way through on this dark golf course and no lights, and then poof, bright. And I wasn't afraid of the dark. I was afraid of what's in the dark.
Yeah, right.
Right? When you live in an unsafe environment internally, I was terrified. So I would get on this bike, and I'd turn it up, and I'd wait till the bass drops, and I'm like hauling ass down these things. I'm probably like breathing heavy. I'm looking behind me. I feel like things are creeping up on me. All my demons are coming out, and I'm like, I'm trying to get through, and boom, I'd break out. I'd be in the street, and I'd recover. I'm like, oh, okay, we're safe. Okay.
Wow.
And then, I'm already so far into the neighborhood, I'm not driving back. I have to go through the entire, and I would go through multiple holes, and eventually I'd go home. I'd be so exhausted, but I would push myself and feel the burn in my quads and try to embrace that. And you feel that pain and see how far you can go, and test my abilities is where I learned to gain my self-respect in personal training, or gain my respect in physical fitness. So when I was out on playing a sport or walking around, people ask me for advice, I know I can get from experience. I don't have education, but I did have experience. And so these are the little things that I would do. I would run up and down the stairs. I'd do push-ups, sit-ups in the morning. I mean, I would work out 3 times a day when I was in freshman year in high school. All sorts of crazy stuff. I was obsessed, but it all came from a sense of deficiency of something my brothers told me when I was younger. So I'm going to fast forward to high school, right? I'm going to skip a lot of steps here, but when I finally was able to compete on one of the largest platforms for the fastest state in the country, and one of the, we were ranked in the nation for a while, phenomenal coaches. I can prove that. It wasn't us runners. It's definitely the coaches. And I realized, I'm like, hey, man, made to the state meet, qualified, all this stuff. I remember going to my brothers who were there at the state meet, taking off my medals and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, bro. He said, I was smaller than you. I was weaker than you. I was this, I was that, all these things, rubbing it in their face. And they didn't even care. They're just like, are you talking to me? And not disrespectfully, they're genuinely, they're like, yeah, dude, you're still on that? Dude, I don't even remember telling you that. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what do you mean? No, I did all this to prove myself that I'm better than. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, kind of empty. Because I'm like, I don't know. I didn't get what I thought I would have gotten from all the work that I put in. And the reality is that a couple of things. One, it didn't matter. But before I got to that point, getting to that point in track and field and sports and stuff like that, I learned along the way that I can help people in the process. And I realized, even though I was trying to prove my demons and fight my demons and do all these things and resist and all my insecurities, everything else, because I started to have some fruit on the tree and getting some physical results, people would ask me for advice. And I would give them advice because if I can save them one tear, I'll sacrifice myself for it to a point where it was a fault. And I would give all my information away. So my personal training career started with, actually, she can let me say this name. Well, I'll say the last name. So her name is Cassie, and she was really, really, really thin. And we would walk together. We'd go to the gym, and she'd come back, and her insecurity was too thin. There's another girl in the neighborhood. I think her name was Gabriella. She loved donuts. And so she says, I love donuts. I'm never going to give up my 6 donuts. I said, that's fine. When do you eat them? She goes, at the beginning of the day, end of the day. I said, eat them at the beginning of the day. Let's see what happens. 12 years old. I was making crap up. She lost 6 pounds.
Right, because at night,
Yeah.
you don't want to eat at night.
100%.
Right.
And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, whoa, this is kind of cool. Like, how did I know that? Like, why did I know that, So along the path of all these insecurities, there's a lot of people that I helped along the way. And so even though I made it to the top and kind of proved my brothers wrong, it wasn't really about that at that time. Although I did want to kind of rub it in their face. One, they didn't care. So I was like, all right, well, that's okay,
moving
whatever.
on. Right.
Yeah, moving on.
At this
but at the
point,
same time, there's
yeah.
so much that we helped with other people to get there to where they're from. And so I realized my contribution back to the world is I love helping people get from point A to point B. Now, the vehicle that I apply myself into doesn't really matter for me. As long as I'm doing that, right? And so I just so happened to, and I did fall into personal training. I didn't want to be a personal trainer.
Yeah.
I went to talk to my student guided counselor, and she was like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" I said, "I don't know. Like, I never thought about college. I don't know. I'm just focused on track and field. That's all I was focused on.
Yeah.
It was my ticket out of the household, if I could put it that way,
Yeah.
and kind of just move on away from all that trauma and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Parents' divorce, it was kind of sticky, and so I just wanted to get away from it and escape. And so I didn't want to be a personal trainer, but all I knew was how to run track. So they said, look, just do personal trainer, sign it up for right now as your major, and when you get to college, you can change it. Then I was going to go to athletic training. When I got to college, it's called ATEC, as we call it at our school, and I realized they're all broke. And so I went to physical therapy, and I realized I didn't have the education, I didn't have the wits for it. And so I never wanted to be a personal trainer, so I ended up dropping out of school. And long story short, my dad actually opened up a door here in West Palm. I was living in Tampa at the time. Opened up in West Palm for me to volunteer at a gym. And I visited my dad, right? There's a story behind that. But I visited my dad, and that guy, his name is Joe. He owns a gym today, still does in downtown West Palm. And he said, my dad said, hey, this is my son, Zack. I know I mentioned it before. He'd love to volunteer. I'm like, oh, what the heck? I was down, but at the same time, I was like, I live in another city 4 hours away. Like, what? And the guy just looks at me. He goes, so when can you start?
Wow.
I turned around. I'm like, what? He goes, you're the only one here. Like, when can you start? He was like really snippy. I was like, I can as soon as possible. It's like, I don't know how to personal train. I don't have an education. I don't have a certification. I don't have any of this stuff. He goes, that's okay. I'll teach you. He said, can you start in 30 days? I said, yeah. He said, okay, I'll see you in 30 days. You know what's crazy? Today is September, 29th, 30th?
Yeah, 29th.
October 16th would be my 10th year. Right. Yeah. October 16th would be my 10th year since I moved down to West Palm. The day I moved down was the day that I started.
Wow.
So it's almost been 10 years of my professional career.
So your dad put you on the path.
Oh, 100%. And here's the thing.
In multiple ways.
Here's the thing. This is the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest asset that you can have in life is to take advice. And this is how I filter information. When you talked about social media, I have a lot to say about that. If people were held 100% responsible for the information that they gave out, and all the people who follow that information, if they got hurt, if that person who put it out there was responsible for it, we would have a social media.
Everything would change.
It would be nothing but cat videos, which I'm down for too. You know what I'm saying? Like it would not. It would be so hard because now you're
liable. Nobody's liable for the information.
So that's one. So filtering the information when we were back in the day, they didn't have enough information, and so having the internet give us an abundance of information in the digital age, informational age. Now the skill set is how to properly filter that information, and that's the new skill set. And so we're in the segue between that, and you do obviously really well with that. And so what I've learned is I filter my information based on my values and based on who has the fruits in this area of my life. I will only seek information from people who have what I want, nothing else. But there's a correlation here, especially in person. If I make business decisions like this individual makes business decisions, I will also have their relationships. And the question is do I want that marriage and the relationship with my kids? Yeah. And so I became very, very specific about who I allowed to speak into my life, especially on platforms. So I became obsessive in detoxing all this stuff out, and I only put positive in, but because I allowed myself and I had a phenomenal and still have connection with the greatest person I know. He's the greatest man I know. His name is Joe. I won't say his last name here, but I have more respect for that individual than anyone else. If he said today, hey, Zack, we had a change of course, and we're meeting at my clubhouse, I would lead this podcast right now, and I would go. I wouldn't have in a heartbeat. Number one influence in my life, okay? Not saying that I would, because I love being here with you. This is great. Of course. But in a heartbeat, right? Yeah. And so he began to coach and mentor me and take me from a boy to becoming a man. Yeah. Right? And that also included a sense of ownership, getting over your insecurities, right? Faith over fear type of situation, doubling your failure rate to get to success. You want to become successful, double your failure rate.
Absolutely.
How do you grow, Zach? Mad or matter. When you get so upset and frustrated with your circumstances, your brain starts ticking in a way where you start dialing in on the thing that, and it reveals the things that you need to be personally taking more of ownership on, and you start working on it, and then it produces the fruit of. He's the one who channeled and funneled, just like my father did, and had other coaches in my life do the exact same thing. I have great mentors in my life. That was my greatest asset. It wasn't what I've done. It wasn't me overcoming. It wasn't opportunity. None of that. It was the people who I allowed to speak into my life. The book that I read says, don't judge people, judge their fruit. Mm-hmm. Because you will have what they have because you're doing what they're doing. And so that's not just with business, but everything else that comes with it. And you can see they are who they say they are, right? Joe, for example, when I met him, I was very skeptical. But the way that I saw when I first met him, it was very interesting. I didn't know who he was. There's a room of 100 people. I've never met in my life. He's never seen me. I've never seen him. Mm-hmm. And I walk into a room and we make eye contact. And I knew it was him. I saw him look through all of my armor, the armor that I had on, and I didn't know I was wearing armor. I realized I was when he looked at me, and I was naked. And I walked up to him. I said, "You must be Joe." He says, "You must be Zack." That was the beginning of our relationship. Out of a room of 100 people, crowded, random as heck. Okay, I forgot where I was going with this. With Joe, filtering information.
Well, you were just talking about how you've had some great mentors in your life, and that this was to do with this Joe person. Was that somebody that do with your father, or was that somebody else?
Not to do with my father, but he put me on the right path.
It put you on the right path.
Yeah, he put me on the right path of entrepreneurship. And what he does is he specializes in startup businesses, if I could put it that way, in entrepreneurship and business.
Got it.
I learned everything that I know today. This gym is literally a reflection of everything he's done. He's taught me all the success principles, all the books to listen to, how to filter information, how to select people going through a vetting process, checking on character, all these things, these fundamental spiritual principles, as I call them, universal principles.
Yes.
He helped not only bring these to the table, but then, that's what I was saying. When I first met Joe, I didn't know who he was, but when I met him, I knew who he was. This is how I knew what everyone around me said about him. Talk about so great of this guy.
Yes.
This is how I knew this is who Joe was. You ready? The way that his wife looked at him told me everything I needed to know about his character. And the admiration. If my wife looked at me that way, I know I've earned it. That's self-respect. And I earned her respect to create a safe environment for her. And not perfect, but the way that she looked at him with admiration, bro, moved me to my core. I no longer questioned him. Mm-hmm. It was the evidence, the fruit. And so in my eyes, there's different stages of manhood. He's in king stage, moving into sage stage. King stage is when, think about it, kingdom. King of your domain, the people in your environment that you've created, both online and in real life. You're the king of your domain. Every man is a king of their domain. And how do you know if the kingdom is flourishing and happy? Well, look around in the kingdom. Don't look at the king. Where are they at? And I saw the evidence of his leadership. I was standing in it. And I realized, this man's the real deal. I was like, I can trust someone I can follow someone like that. And eventually I learned to, because he just kept on loving on me, kept on loving on me, kept on pouring into me. And he served me in ways that no one has ever served me. Not because they couldn't, it's because he earned it himself. And he didn't have that background because someone served him. So the greatest asset, in my opinion, that anyone can have is having someone that you can, first you must look for that individual, be willing to be coachable. And this is what Joe says. Same with Yoda and when you're ready, when the student is ready, the master will come.
Yes.
100%.
Not the other way around. It's never the other way around. Yeah.
Napoleon Hill, he says that become first an intelligent student. Right? Before you become a great leader, become an intelligent student. What is an intelligent student? What does that mean? Right? And so he put me on the right path. And I'm just so very thankful to have him speak into my life, pour into my life. And I know that there's love there with no agenda. I know there's nothing but love there. I'm so very thankful for that, because it's relationships like those, right, that put me on the path, that gave me the right resources, that I am literally, I kid you not, I'm a product of his environment and many others. And I do have different mentors in different areas of my life.
Sure.
And someone could give me advice. That's great. Here's the thing. If you and I drive the same car, I'm not taking stock advice from you because you and I drive the same car.
Right.
Not the car itself, but you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Versus
yes.
someone who there is fruit on a tree and this is what they've done and they have credentials and they have the right agenda.
Yes.
Right? Credibility and agenda is key in regards to influencing me. That's how I filter influences.
Yes.
Making sure they have the right agenda. Right? They want the best for Zack, period. Right? And there is benefit in that too, right? Because you should benefit as well if you're pouring into me kind of situations.
Yeah.
So that's reality, right?
Yes,
that's
of
a
course.
really blessing. It's an amazing thing, right? So both nourishing one another.
Mm-hmm.
The agenda's there, but also credibility. And when that person has it, they have my attention in that category.
Yes.
You have to earn the rest, right?
Yes.
Because I filter very hard because man will always fail, right?
Yeah.
So I do filter that, but I do believe having someone speak into someone's life and then someone be receptive to receive what the individual is saying, right? In my opinion, that in and of itself is greater than anything else.
Yes.
And not having that coach or mentor or someone above who can bring you along in those areas in your life, man, you are shooting blind.
Yeah.
And sure as heck, I will not follow you. I don't care who you are. I will
Absolutely.
not follow you. Period.
Absolutely. And I think that the most important part of the journey is having the right mentors.
Right.
Because it's even before the journey starts when you become that student that you can actually move forward.
Yeah.
You know, I think that many people don't have mentors, and I think it's a big mistake. I think the first thing you do is you seek somebody that you can see based on how they operate, like you said, and you have your own filters. You see them as someone that you want to be potentially.
Emulate.
And then hopefully you can get their attention somehow. But if you're the student and you're ready, you will get their attention.
Yeah.
Because they won't be able to not see you. You'll be everywhere they are. You'll message them. You'll do whatever it takes. That's how I got my first mentors, my first clients. Anyone that I've ever worked with, I reached out to them. I sought them out.
Yes.
I said, you are where I want to be. What do I need to do to get your attention?
Sure.
Anything, a word, an email. Give me anything to put me on the path. Test me.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go do it, and I'm going to come back to you with it done, and then I want you to give me the next thing. And I don't want anything. I just tell me.
Yeah.
And I think that saves so much time.
Everything.
In searching and seeking and trial and error and all this stuff. So knowing what we know now, and then how did you meet Joe?
Through a guy named Jason met me at a Chipotle.
Oh,
And,
so this was like a random.
No, actually, there's a story there. I was starting up a construction business.
Okay.
And we would do hard copy. So you would literally have a flyer and you put it in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Sure.
And you would put it inside the mailboxes essentially. And I would drive around all day for 8 hours a day. And I'd take hundreds of flyers. And I'd do 800, usually about 800 to about 1,000 a day. I would do this for 8, 9, 10 hours driving on the wrong side of the road. Stories about that car.
This is to get your
crazy,
company
just
off
to get
the
the
ground.
business off the ground, right? Just to get business and you get
This
calls.
is what it takes.
I would get on rollerblades, dude, because like then they were smart. They were very smart. They didn't have individual mailboxes. They had one just box, and
with the
everyone would go to it, and they would. So
Yeah.
I had to go door to door, and I wasn't gonna miss it because it's a new neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we did hardscaping, outdoor living, Charlotte,
sure.
porches, pergolas, decks, outdoor grills, etc. Right, well, fireplaces, and I'm like, this is the number one industry there. As here, it's probably retail and like health and fitness is very popular here.
Yeah.
North Carolina is outdoor living. Having time with your family, inviting people over Thanksgiving, things like that. So it's the number one business there. And so I would put on my entrepreneurship, put on those rollerblades, and I would go door to door and I would drop off those flyers. And bro, I can't tell you how many times there's like some electrical guy looking out and he just starts videotaping me because I'm going to each and every house in one of these. I'm slipping, I'm sliding, I'm twirling and stuff, and I don't know how to rollerblade. You know what I'm saying? And you're just downhill. I'm like, I'm from Florida, man. We don't have hills, right? The biggest hill we have here is a golf course. You know what I'm saying?
That's it.
So I'm not used to it. Was crazy, but that's how I got business. And I take them off, put them in the trunk, go to the next neighborhood,
Go to
and
the
go to the
next,
next
it
one.
doesn't matter.
And so I was
Yeah.
getting lunch. And I was on a really, really tight budget. I start pre-making all my meals. It was $1.76 per meal. I mapped it out: rice, broccoli, sweet potato, and chicken. I would just eat that with like Polynesian sauce from Chipotle or Chick-fil-A. And that's what I lived on: breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because I was just so broke and just trying to get the business off the ground.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so one day I'm coming out of a very specific neighborhood, an area, and something in my gut tells me exactly where I need to be. It says, go to this Chipotle.
Huh.
And I'm sitting there in my car, I'm at the light, and I look over, and it's my meal that's sitting right there. And I'm like, why am I going to Chipotle? And the light turns green, and I start driving in that direction. And After battling in my mind for about 15 minutes, I finally get there and I'm looking up and it's the exact same image in my mind. I'm like, okay. So I reverse parked, walked right inside. I start eating Chipotle. I'm reading my books and this guy walks into Chipotle. I say, he looks at me, I look at him, we nod and stuff like that. And it was the weirdest thing ever, man. I'm talking about the weirdest exchange experience.
That is very,
you ready?
very,
Here's
very
the thing.
odd.
It's lunchtime, so everyone gets their food and gets out because it's kind of like a business district. And there's 3 people in the Chipotle. There's probably like 30 seats. It's pretty large, right? And this guy sits right next to me. Like he brushes his butt along my elbow and sits right there. And I like look at him and I turn around. Bro, there was one person way down over there and way over here. This man sits right next to me. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. So I'm just reading my books, kind of doing my thing. And we get talking. He ends up being like a normal dude. Yeah. And he asks me what I do. And I told him and I asked him what he did. And he said he's connected to a guy named Joe. Financially independent, very successful individual. Sure. And I can go about his accolades. It's incredible. And I said, I was mad, genuinely, when I heard about this, because he was coaching this individual, Jason, how to get out of his job, if I could put it that way, by helping him become financially independent, because this is what Joe does. Yeah. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, after everything that I've been through, and I've never met a guy like this, very contempt at this time. Like I was just very about me. I'm sitting there, I'm like, why the heck do you know someone like that? And I don't. I was mad. I was like, dude, I should know someone like this. This is ridiculous. I go through way too much crap. So I said, what do I got to do? Just like you said. What do I got to do? And I sought Jason out and he opened up the door to Joe. And ever since then, my life's been different since the day I met Joe. So that's kind of like how I met Joe. It's kind of a crazy thin threads, very thin threads.
Yeah. So I find it interesting that you can be working on one business and that the activity that you do building and failing and at one thing will give you the universal boost.
Oh my gosh.
For the next thing.
100%.
It's all the same. Mm-hmm. When you look at the plane of the energy of how it works is it doesn't matter what you're grinding to achieve. It doesn't matter. You're doing something totally different now, right? But you proved to the universe that you were willing to eat shit, literally, for X amount of time, and for that, you got tested.
There's a
you
return.
were tested. You got the ROI, and the ROI was meeting Joe, and from that point, your life was different. And had you faltered and not done the rollerblades, had you done anything different, you wouldn't have met Joe, and you wouldn't have had that gut feeling. And that's one of the most important things that I've learned from doing these podcasts and that I tell people from my own journey is just put in the effort and go through the pain. Do something that puts you onto the path of failure. Because once you hit that rock bottom somewhere else, a door will open to the next thing that you've got to grind through and go through. And it's always this stepping stone. But it's not going to be one thing. It's going to be all these different things. You just got to be ready for that and be open for it to be that. It doesn't have to be what you think it is. You know?
100%. And even in a practical sense, because what you're saying covers so much ground. There's so much wisdom in what you're saying. How to apply that in this very moment this is my belief system is I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Faith.
Now,
here's the thing about faith. I read a book called How Faith Works. Probably works, right? Learn what that is, because I didn't know what it was. Difference between faith and belief. Very big difference.
Very big difference, yes.
So I won't go between all that, down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Faith can be interchanged at any moment. It's a synonym for action.
Yes.
Action on what you believe. Now, faith and fear are very interesting. It's action on what you fear the most. Now, here's the thing. If you're not asking the right questions, you will always get the wrong answers, or you will always get an answer. It may not produce the results that you want. So it's a slow down to speed up kind of process. And so practically everyone knows, if I say, put your fear on the table right now, what are you afraid of do practically today that you could do, that you would do if you knew you didn't fail or would be embarrassed, or whatever the opposite of the fear is? What would that be? And that's where it is. So there's a book called Magic Thinking Big. It's literally sitting in my car. And chapter 2, 12, and 13 talks about the failure diseases. Again, Joe put me on this book, failure diseases. He says, Zach, if you like what you read in 2, 12, and 13, read the rest of the book. If you don't, put the book down, and here's another book to follow up. Put me on an education process. And chapter 2, 12, and 13. And in that book, there's one phrase, my favorite all-time phrase, action cures fear. And now I know why. He wasn't referring to just action. It was faith. Faith on action on what it is that you believe. And so the practical sense and what I'm referring to in regard to what you're saying. Why would I put on the rollerblades? Why would I go through the hunt? That gut feeling, put myself in a position to do all those things. It requires courage.
Yeah.
And this really, now I'm going to kind of go pivot just a little bit, if you don't mind.
No,
the
of course.
values for the gym here is an acronym for focus. Okay. F stands for faith, action on what you believe. Action cures fear. O stands for optimization, or maximizing, or standard of excellence for oneself, not for others, but for oneself. Right? This is all for the trainers. C stands for courage, which I think is the toughest one. Not the toughest in the sense that it's the hardest thing to do, but how do you generate courage? And I believe if you want a big dream, you get around big dreamers. You chase the heat. Chasing the heat, what does that mean? Chasing the heat in regards to mentorship is you get around other people who are on it, bro. They're on fire. They're in a season of their life. Everything they do turns to gold. I mean, they're just crushing the game, right? Trending, as some people call it. They're crushing the game. You see what I'm saying? And when you get around those people, you start to receive information from them, right? Little nuggets here and there that help you break through. And the thing is you're becoming more equipped, right? With what it is that helps you with your life, because they talk about their struggles and their victories. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
And so you begin to chase the heat and get around those people. And the closer you get to the heat, the more warmed up you get. So the key is getting close to the heat. You chase the heat at all times. If you're cold and you're stuck in your own head and you're fearful and you're all these things, dude, you need to get around people. You need to get around people who have success and what it is that you want to achieve. Get in front of them. You start taking action. It doesn't matter it's not about messing up. It's not about yourself. Get your head off yourself. Focus on other people. Serve other people. Give what you don't have and you'll receive what it is that you didn't have. Right. If you don't feel love, give love and you'll receive love. You see what I'm saying?
That's how give to get.
In some capacity, yeah, absolutely, yeah. You have to give to get, and you have to put in. You're absolutely right. Sow seeds in order to get something back. If you want heat, you put in firewood. You don't just get heat from the firewood. You put wood there, and nothing happens. You have to light it, right? And then it comes. You get heat, right? 100% give to get. I completely agree with you. Yes, and so you get around the heat, and the thing is that eventually it gets to a point where their belief. Again, this is why mentorship and coaching is so important, which I want to touch on that, but. When those people begin pouring into you, you then begin to borrow their belief and begin to believe in yourself. That was Joe for me. I didn't believe in myself. I have not the worst background, but it wasn't easy either. And so as he began to pour into me, he said, Zach, man, borrow my belief. Borrow my belief to just take action. Pick up that phone, give a call. Go out there, go above and beyond. Go back to your car. Even if it's weird, man, go say hi to that person. Right? Go ask that person if you could take their cart. Begin to step out of that comfort zone. And I didn't have the courage to do it. It's too insecure. It's too about myself. I didn't know how to do it. I was like, to mess up. And I did some I weirded some people out. Pretty sure someone probably called the cops. I was just weird. I just weird shit, you know? But the thing is I borrowed his belief until I learned how to believe in myself. And then when you learn to believe in yourself, not in then, but I would say in the process, that borrowing that belief around people who genuinely care about you. And I hope someone has one person who genuinely cares about them. And a lot of times people don't think they have people that genuinely care about them. It's just that they're not opening up to a person and actually talking about their struggles. And then you realize that person actually cares and they never had an opportunity for them to be spoken into. And then they realize, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by loving people. For example, someone's about to commit suicide, they reach out and then you have a whole bunch of people who surround them. It's like, dude, we don't want that to happen. Like, we didn't know you were struggling. So then you start pouring into that person and make sure that they don't do that. Men have that conversation about you, but I get it all the time. And so my point is that I began to borrow his belief and it began to develop courage inside of me. And that courage, it's hard because when we get disappointed and we get hurt and backstabbed, and I can tell you, I have some stories about backstabbed and business and relationships and family and all these things, right? And I've done it myself. I'm not free of that. I've done it myself. I've been a part of the problem. Joe taught me pointed me in the direction to be a part of the solution, right? That courage, as it develops inside of you, it's almost like a tank. And at a certain point, that tank gets filled up because you're around people who love you and support you, et cetera. And they start pushing you in the direction that you want to go in. Not their agenda, but their agenda is to help you. Then you begin to get to a point where you feel like you got to take some action. You're going to do something. It's going to overflow, and that overflow is action. So I genuinely do believe, and that can come from the esoteric side, right? The love and everything else, but that could also come from pain. You just get mad. You get so frustrated. You just start moving, bro. You just get sick and tired.
I think it's tolerance. When you are done tolerating,
sick of it, bro.
Yeah, when you're sick of it, when you will not tolerate anymore, that's my overflow.
100%.
I'm done tolerating.
And it gets you moving.
I just cannot tolerate it.
It gets you moving. You know?
And I just, my objective, to just add to your point, is to lower my threshold for tolerance in anything in my life I find negative. I want to have the smallest level of tolerance. So this way, it becomes intolerable almost immediately, and then I have to change it. This way, I don't wait for it to exacerbate. And I think controlling tolerance threshold is a really important aspect of awareness, because you don't think you're tolerating something, but you are. It happens a lot with relationships, partnerships, things like that. You start to tolerate things that you shouldn't be tolerating, and your threshold gets worse and worse, because when you tolerate something you shouldn't tolerate, the other party realizes this subconsciously, potentially, right? And then what happens is that they'll push even further and further and further. And then eventually you feel so pressed that by the time you realize you can't tolerate anymore, you're so far beyond any reparability of the situation that you pass the opportunity. And then, of course, you don't tolerate it, so you have to make a change. You have to take action. But you could have done it sooner and potentially salvaged a lot more.
Sure.
And so I think tolerance and being sick of it, being sick of things more quickly should be imposed on one's discipline. Yeah,
100%.
Boundaries.
Yeah,
Yes,
there's a
that's
book
the
on
word.
boundaries. I only got to page 127, and I realized, I said, one, I can work on this for the next 2 years, and I still won't get it, so I'm going to pause here. And I know other people, they could just read the book and they're fine. But I learned that in a book called Boundaries. And when I realized this, it explained a lot of what I was going on, especially even how the gym came about specifically, a very direct correlation. And I learned quite a bit. And so boundaries are quite key, and they're not walls. I thought they were walls. I guess mine is still kind of a wall, a little protective sometimes. So it's more like a wall with a drawbridge. You know?
Yeah, that's good.
But there's definitely some sharks down there. Like if you fall over, it's real thin too. So I make it a vetting process. Like that's just, hey, that's welcome to my kingdom.
Yeah.
But once you're in, it's freaking a party. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
But
sure,
you got to get in,
sure.
right? So, but yeah, their wall boundaries are gates. They have gates and they're fences, and you allow things in, because if you don't allow anything in at all, then everything's internally explosion, right?
Yeah,
So you have to allow a little bit in and out, et cetera. So there's a little bit of an understanding, if you will, and some soft skills involved there, for sure. Some grace and mercy and love and forgiveness and all those things involved with that. And people learn that for sure. But boundaries are key, and I do believe that there's certain people who have certain tendencies, or everyone has different tendencies based on personality and how we deal with things,
especially as men.
Oh my gosh, yeah, especially. But men are, that's true. And for the most part, for dudes, it's respect at the end of the game. You know, it's all about respect, you know, and for ladies, it's love. And so, but yeah, between dudes, it's, I mean, think about the Spartans, or even the Greeks when they would handshake. Do you know why they would grab here? Have you ever seen a Greek ever do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you watch like Troy.
I don't know why though.
So watch, when they do this, you know what they're checking? Right here is where someone would have a knife inside their gauntlet. And so they wanted to check to make sure that there's trust.
That's cool.
Because they would take it out and there'd be an ambush. And so what they would do is they would check. Even though they trust you and you're brothers, blood brothers, they're still checking.
Trust
they
but
understand.
verify.
Yes, always, right?
Trust but
so,
verify.
and there's boundaries of respect with men, right?
Yeah.
And we do that for a reason.
Yeah.
And so it goes way back, right? That's why they do that. So, yeah, boundaries is a very interesting topic, and tolerance is key on that one for sure.
There's going to be like a follow-up podcast, I think.
For sure.
So what comes after courage now?
Courage is unity.
Unity.
Yeah, unity. So there's a I had to learn this. It's very interesting. At least for me, it was, because I didn't understand it before. There is a difference between being in alignment and agreement. Okay. All because we don't, I can be in agreement, or excuse me, not alignment, agreement and approval. There's a difference. Okay. I can be disapproval of somebody and still be in agreement with who they are. What does that mean? What I mean by that, the goal, at least in training, right, is to make sure between the trainers that we're serving the client. At the end of the day, we're serving the client. We're focused on the client because we're focused on the client. However, our methodology and how we get there doesn't need to be the same. Someone can disagree with how I go about doing something in terms of like how to teach, like Zeke. He may teach Bulgarian split squats different than I do. But at the end of the day, we're focused on the client. And as long as it's producing results and someone's not getting hurt, it doesn't matter. Although I disapprove his technique, which I don't. I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
He's phenomenal technique. I actually learned quite a bit. He's a phenomenal trainer.
Yeah, I talked to him a little bit.
Phenomenal.
He's great. Yeah.
And great trainer. And so the thing is that he may have a different technique or style on how he does things, right? But even if we didn't, hey, we're still focused on the client. We're in disapproval, but we always have to be in agreement. We have to be in alignment, right? And so unity is key. And when clients see that there's unity within the trainers, right? Then the clients can trust everything that's going on in the environment.
Yes.
Now, here's my biggest thing when it comes to business, and this is why I vet. And I tell my trainers as they're onboarding the same thing, right? And I tell them, I say, look, here's the thing. You have to also know my agenda as well. It's not that I'm vetting you. You're also vetting me to see if I am who I say I am. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course.
And so this is where the unity aspect comes in, is because they're also vetting me as well.
Of course.
Right?
They're committing their time, their livelihood, everything
Sure.
to the.
So guess who my first customer is?
Who?
It's not my clients. My first customer is my trainer.
Your trainer.
And if you serve your trainer will serve your clients.
Yeah.
My first customer is my trainer. Now, I won't say this, that if the client complains about something and it's legitimate, that I'm going to be like, oh, no, well, screw you because I defend my trainer. Well, that's stupid.
Right.
I won't sacrifice, and I learned this hard way. Man, this is a rough one for me to learn, lesson to learn, in a book called Winning with People by John Maxwell, favorite book by John Maxwell ever. I refer to him a lot because he's a leadership guru in the world, right? Coach and mentor is Joe and Mary Beth, right? That's Joe's wife. And he also leads United Nations. So then he teaches United Nations and then goes to Joe Mary Beth's, and then Joe Mary Beth pours it into me, and I go to Christ Fellowship. I hear it again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, that's wild, right? Universal principles. Doesn't matter the circumstances. Doesn't matter. They still apply. And so I was referring to
Trainer's your first.
Trainer's my first, yeah.
You won't sacrifice.
Yeah, so I won't.
You have to learn the hard way. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not going to sacrifice the client for the circumstance. I will always value, I think I said that right, I'm always going to value the person first over the circumstance. I used to do the opposite because I'm focused on the result, and therefore I sacrifice the person in the name of doesn't matter. It does not matter. And unfortunately, if I'm always winning, someone else is losing. Hard lessons I had to learn through loss, like you said, so then I can gain, right? And now how to learn how to nurture those relationships within the community. We call it an ecosystem because all of us are specialized. We all specialize in something different. We all complement one another. And therefore, we're not doing the same thing. We all kind of do something a little bit differently. I allow that expression, that signature of how they go about things, their branding of who they are. I want that expression here because their creative output is unlimited and they can become a better trainer to then serve the client. And so how that works is being in unity. And so my very first customer is my trainer. I know if I take care of them, they'll take care of the client. And so I'm willing to be backstabbed on that law. I'm willing to be hurt. I'm willing for people to scream. I'm willing to. Why? Because it develops courage. It requires courage for me to trust people to do it. But I'm willing to put myself out there because I'm confident in myself that no matter what happens, I am going to bounce back because I have had to. Right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm also willing to be courageous in this area, to be willing to serve those guys, even if they, at the risk of them stabbing me, is because I know that no matter what, I'm always going to come back. Right? And so that's where that kind of unity comes in, is that our unity is that I got their backs. That's the biggest thing at the end of the day.
And that's important to them too.
And sometimes, and I will say this, is that sometimes clients get really comfortable with the trainers. And so they start pushing the boundaries, as you say, and the trainer wants to be tolerant of the situation because they're understanding.
Yeah.
But the thing is sometimes unknowingly that clients would sometimes take advantage of trainers.
Yeah.
And then that's when I get ticked and I go, nope, we're charging that client. Why? Because it's within 24-hour notice. If they cancel and it's not medical, you need to get paid.
Yeah.
So
right.
if they have an issue with it, come talk to me. Why? Because I want to make sure my boys and girls get paid. They have to eat at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Even though your circumstances, I'm so sorry, right? I mean, God forbid, dog swallows a sock, I'm not going to charge you. It's medical, right? A car breaks down. Okay, I'm going to be lenient with that. You're not expecting that. But sometimes clients can get a little bit creative.
Yes.
And so we have to put them at boundaries. I have my boys and girls back.
Yes.
We're in unity all the time. These are my people. These are my warriors. These are the people I love. These people I will protect.
Yes.
And the last one for focus is S is service.
I was going to say service or servitude.
Servitude is really what it comes down to, which is,
yeah.
in my opinion, manhood. Synonyms, exact same thing. It's selflessness, right? We're not focused on ourselves and your agenda. And well, if I take my clients to one, and I had this girl come and she was going through the vetting process and she's like, hey, Zach, I don't think be a great fit. I said, hey, I totally understand. I'm glad we had the conversation, but I would love to know why, just so I can do things better on my end. She goes, well, I'm not going to make as much money and I got a better deal here and this, that, and the other. Now, as a business, that's a good decision to be made. In my opinion, based on deeper circumstances, which I'm not going to get into, this is all I heard. Me, mine, income, schedule, etc. And so there's an element of protecting your book of business. I completely agree. But I can sense it was not about her client. She was focused on herself,
Yeah.
which then could potentially sacrifice clients.
Yeah.
And so I hope that doesn't happen. But I noticed that, and I said, man, you know what? I'm going to definitely keep this door open because she may need a place if it doesn't work out in the direction that she wanted to go to, and extend that grace. And so I encourage her, shoot her a text, high five her when I see her and stuff like that. Nothing against her. I just know in the back of my mind, I'm like, that might have been because it was pure selfishness. It was pure financial gain. It had nothing to do with the clients. And I can go down that line. I don't want to refer to anybody in particular, but we have had very, very serious conversations with other business owners who are full on, all about me, full on, verbatim.
Yeah.
It's not about the client. I will place you as a trainer. I will place all your clients. I want financials. I want more money. It's all about me. No one's getting anything extra. Me, period. Like, okay, our values are not the same.
Yeah.
And I departed because I said I'd rather sacrifice the circumstance and save the relationship, and I left. And that's why we have the gym that we have to today.
Yes.
Right? So the heart, I think, is good, but the methodology and how they go about it, I don't really agree with that. It just didn't sit well with me, and I wasn't at peace with it. So I had to depart. It did not sit well with my values.
Interesting.
So,
it was interesting that people would say that, who are business owners, considering that Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, by the way, Amazon lost money for the first 10 years of operation.
Isn't that, I saw that.
You saw
Isn't
that
that
one?
crazy?
It's wild.
Like $215 million or negative. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Talk about failing for 10 years. You can't fail for in 2 months? Come on. One of the things, though, is he said it's always been about the customer. That was his main thing when he's interviewed as a young guy, and he says, our insane focus on the customer and giving them the best possible experience is what will make us the biggest, the wealthiest company in the world.
You even said it like him. That was impressive.
I did, right? I was trying to tap into my inner Bezos.
Well, you're getting there. That's good. That's awesome.
So whenever you don't, it's all about that. Sacrifice what you want now for what you want most. And I think it's an immaturity and short-sightedness in thinking that, yes, you need this now. We get it. You want a better schedule right now, and you want more money, and you want da-da-da-da-da. But those are things you need right now based on that circumstance, because you're not looking at the bigger picture. And I think that's Bezos' biggest thing.
And those things are important. I'm not saying you neglect
They're not.
it
Of course
completely.
they are.
However,
Yes.
how you go about it is a reflection of leadership.
Yes.
And who you're receiving, whoever that may be, myself especially,
Yes.
not excluding the other people, myself especially, I'm in the same boat as them.
Yes.
I'm no different than them. I'm going through what those people are going through. And it's like, okay, how will I deal with the situation? It's all 100% leadership, and based on the information that you're seeking and receiving is how it's going to come out.
100%.
Right? What comes in, it comes out, right? So through the senses and go down that path. But the whole point is that that's a reflection of leadership. And so I'm not willing to follow someone who's willing to sacrifice all the relationships based on one thing for selfish gain. That's a tyrannical force in my eyes. And I said, you know what? I've been that person.
Sure.
I've been that person before. That's why I was so isolated. That's why I moved to West Palm. I had no relationships. I sabotaged all my relationships. I have been the Hitler. I have been the Stalin.
Yeah.
But because I know that's who I could be as well, right? I also now know who not to be.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? A little bit of loss for some gain. And so the reality is which I love. Do you listen to Jordan Peterson by chance?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, dude. He is on fire.
Yeah,
So,
he's on fire. He's been on fire for a long time.
I saw him. Yeah, I just recently, probably about 2-3 years ago, and I'll just say this, he kept me alive quite a bit.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah, through this season, about 2 years ago, he kept me alive. There's a couple things there, pretty deep. And one of the things,
known to help.
Man,
So
all
many,
men. My brothers and I, we saw him in Tampa when he
Oh,
was on
you
tour.
did?
Oh, dude, it was nuts. And so insane. Then we got Korean barbecue afterwards. It was the best thing
Which
ever.
is
And then I
great.
drove back at like 3 o'clock in the morning. That's the grind it takes.
Yeah, why
and,
not?
and it was
Got
like
Korean
it was on a
barbecue.
Tuesday. Got Korean
It's
barbecue.
fine.
Had Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
I'm like flying to work,
That
fired
is an
up. My clients
easy
are like,
drive. I'm
"What in the world?
chilling
Like,
in the
how
car
are
at
you
3
awake
a.m.
right now?" I'm like, "Let's go!" Right? Like,
Do
I'm
you
fired
know
up.
what I've been through? I've got Korean barbecue in my veins, and I've got Jordan Peterson in my head. I'm fired up.
I'm good. Let's go. It was so good. And one of the things he says was he gave a different interpretation of what one of the verses in the Bible says, that meek shall inherit the poor. And what does he mean by meek, right? Meek in the English dictionary without context is going to be weakness. And there is a sense of weakness and sense of humility, right? But meek shall inherit the poor is that I have a sword and you have a sword. We both are dogs. We both have teeth. I know I can tear someone apart. I know I'm a Stalin. I know I'm a Hitler. I know that's inside of me now. And I can't reject it because I've seen it fruition in my life, and that sucks. But here's the thing. My comeback story is I changed my ways, checking my character, having the right proper guidance, and rise from that situation in regards to my character. Not perfect, but still growing. And the thing is even though I can stab you and you can stab me, we're still going to trust each other.
Yeah, right.
You see what I'm saying?
Right,
but you still check, right?
Yes.
And so what I loved about that, though, is that we all have teeth.
Yeah.
Some people don't have teeth. It's guys between nice guys and good guys. Nice guys, they give me the not good.
Yeah.
And I was the nice guy. Then there's good guys. They do what's right.
Yeah.
Not based on what everyone wants and expects of them. There's a very big difference between that. Wild at Heart, John Eldridge, phenomenal book. Probably the number one book I've ever read in my entire life. And the point is, though, is that we all have teeth. And I can use them, but I'm going to choose not to. I have the sword to be able to cut you open, but I'm going to choose to sheath it, even though you deserve it, even though you backstab me, even though it's right. It is the right thing to do. Not righteous, but it's the right thing to do because what you did to me, an eye for an eye. But I'm choose not to anyways. Turn the other cheek. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
This is the meek shall inherit the poor. Why? Because the example you exempt around everyone else for not blowing up on that person, not fucking them up, not decking that person in the face, not sabotaging their reputation, not as someone who's going to destroy the way that other people perceive them because things didn't work out the way that it was. All those things, right? Because I'm going to choose not to do that in and of itself, that example is everyone else is going to have respect for you and they're going to trust you because they know, man, I'm surprised you didn't just chew that person out, but instead you extended grace. I had that example in my life. His name is Kimmy. It makes me cry. I cry all the time because I think of the example. I saw the things that individual went through. He is the most resourceful person I've ever met in my entire life. Tony Robbins 101. He says that the reason my business fails is not a matter of resources, but a lack of resourcefulness. He is the most resourceful person I've ever met in my entire life. And he extended grace to me in ways that I still cannot comprehend. I am unbelievably grateful because of his character, and I will go to war with someone if he says that person looked at me wrong. I will rip them to shreds. I will sacrifice it all because that person put it on the line for me. He gave me what I've never received as a human form. Not perfect, but man, I can trust that person. I love that person. I know he loves me.
Yeah.
Those people, a Kimmy, a Coach Ennis for me, it was Joe, all these people in my life. I have a bunch of Jeff. I have a whole bunch of these people in my life. Thankfully, Dan, George, all these people. Those people, dude, they inherited the world, and it's a fruition in their relationships, their mental health, their physical health, their financials, right, their social stand, all those things. I can see the fruition of it. Why? Because they had enough humility, right, to realize that the person they're dealing with is human as well, and they know in themselves that they can be the Stalin, they can be these evil people, but they choose not to be anyways. Shall inherit the world.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Peterson said his big, it's highly quoted in all the motivational videos. He says, you should be a monster.
Oh,
remember that whole thing?
Favorite.
Yeah, you should be a monster, and then you should learn to control it, that kind of thing. And he's mentioned that, I think it was, I forgot what interview it was. It might have been Joe Rogan's podcast that he said that. But it's in so many, because I feed my brain a lot of motivational stuff on a daily basis. It's in so many of the videos. And I think that's where you're kind of pulling that from, and I can only agree. I can agree 100% on that.
Yeah.
And I only wish that more men realized, and women, anybody really realized, is knowing what you could be and then taming it is a much better path.
But you have to find out for yourself. You
have
have to become a monster. You have to find out what does not work so you lose so you can gain. Back to what you're saying.
Yes.
This is entrepreneurship 101.
That's life 101.
That is life 101.
That's life 101 right there. Yeah.
It's like you have to, and then you dial it back, and then you burn out, and then you fail, and then you lose here, and then you lose this business, and then all these things. And what happens is now I run at about 86%. That's the number I've dialed it down to, like percentages. I've done the charts. It's weird, but I'm just crazy. That weird guy because I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything on weekends, and it's just during my downtime. I'm just a weird dude, and I just nerd out. And this is what I do, right? And so I'm 84 to 86% is usually not quite 85 for some reason. I did a chart. It was really weird. Point being is that right around that number is when I realized I can sustain being on it.
Yeah,
on it. 90 too much. Right? It's that 80-20 rule. I'm pushing it to 84 to 86 as hard as I can.
Yeah.
And I'm still kind of doing one of these little things, but I'm learning I can go a little bit beyond 80% and keep it sustainable. I think 80 is the standard, but you have to find out for yourself. You have to go 100% over and over and over to learn how to dial that back.
Yeah, how to dial it back.
Right?
Yeah, for sure. So now that we know sort of your path, a little bit. We still have to talk about Ave Lux and building this and how you got to this and what happened there. But before we do, what did your father have that conversation with you about? We didn't talk on that by the car in the drive where the mosquitoes were biting you.
Oh,
after
yes.
you had invested all that time into working out, he said something to you, and I'm curious if any of that conversation may have influenced, now that we kind of saw the future a little bit, what that conversation was about.
Yeah. Connect the dots moving back.
Yeah.
You can project moving forward.
That's right. That's why I think it's fun that we kind of skipped and now can come back to it.
100%.
Yeah.
And that in and of we've had many conversations. That was one of the biggest ones. Mm-hmm. And he says at a later time as well, he said this once before, and it was the biggest leap of faith I've ever taken, is when I moved from Tampa to West Palm. Pretty wild story. But he said, dude, how my dad said he looked at it was like, sometimes life is like this unbelievably fast moving train, like at the speed of light. And it only comes so many times in your life. And when that sucker comes, bro, you hold on to dear life, to faith, as long as you possibly can, because eventually it's going to drop you off somewhere, and then it's another wilderness, it's another barren desert. You're out in space, you're wherever you are in a desert, and now you're there, and you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And you got to work toward so you can get to the next destination. And so a part of it is personal responsibility, moving yourself forward. Also, a part of it is also God as well. And so you have these different pillars along the road. There's a relationship there that's required for us to move forward, right? That I believe, right? Pulls us forward, And that's what he said. He said, dude, once you have that sense of direction, you operate in faith. And when that train moves, baby, do you better. You hold on to dear life more than anything you ever did. And I held on to those words. That's when I moved from West Palm to Tampa. Yeah. That was a couple years later. But it all built up into that conversation. Yeah. Right? A little bit of a backstory. Ran track and field. Yeah. High school. Yeah. I had different, Arkansas, Ole Miss was the 2 D1 schools, great schools. Arkansas, that year, they had more D1 athletes from that school go to the Olympics than any other school in the country. Okay, phenomenal school. And phenomenal coaches, right? And I went down another path. I went to another school called Lee, and I don't want to say it on here, but what I'll say is that the coach did something illegal. And, well, fuck it. I'm just going to say it. So I went to the school, and because I wasn't running the time, so I got a track and field scholarship. You have track and field in spring. You go to school, college freshman year in fall. Well, fall is cross-country season. I'm not a cross-country runner. And so he assembled a team of coaches, and I'll just say it this way, is that the coach that he assembled probably wasn't the best coach. Okay. And so he would tell our head coach we would do things that we never did. We would go do other things, and it was just we weren't on track. And so I can get into it. So the point is that eventually got to a point where I wasn't producing the times during off season. And so the coach, what he decided to do, this is in September, right? This is crazy. Actually, I haven't said this ever. So like publicly, so I'm just going to say it now. So I hope some of these people are listening a little bit, deep inside me, a little bit. The reason why is because I had a quote unquote full ride scholarship. Didn't have to go to the school. Okay. And so I decided to go to the school, full ride scholarship. He decided to take the money out of my signed scholarship and disperse it with the team. Wow. Which gave them a scholarship because it was a first year for a track program. Whoa. And then when I quit the team, because I knew this happened, because someone called me from the administrator office on a September 9th and said, hey, if you don't make your final payment for XYZ, you're booted from the school. We need our final payment. I said, no, I don't. I don't owe you anything. I have a full ride scholarship. And they're like, well, you should probably come in. So I was yelling at the lady because I was losing it, right? And I had her turn the screen, and I saw a deficit of a couple $1,000s, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, how is that possible? She goes, you probably need to talk to your coach because it's a scholarship money. So I talked to my coach, and he says, well, Zach, you're not running the times I'm asking you to run. I said, Coach, I'm a track and field runner. I'm not a cross-country runner. We're 6 months away from that. 4 months away from that. How do you know what I can run if we're not even – you dispersed it with the team. It's already too late. They already have the money. So even if I did run the times – how can you, So, yeah, let's just say I had a lot of trust issues. And
Damn,
so here's the thing, though. That was the only way that I got into college was going to one of these schools. Right, and the school that I chose to go to ended up stabbing me in the back. Wow. And so the thing is I ended up quitting the team. The first time I ever quit my entire life. I never quit a team in my life. November 7th. remember sitting there and I said, man, this is the last day I would ever run track and field, and this is the way it's going to go down. This was my identity.
Right.
This is who I was.
Right.
This is what I was known for, nationally ranked for. This is who I was.
Right.
Everything, newspapers, all of
Your
it.
whole being
Everything.
gone, ripped.
And I walked away from the team, and the team was mad at me because I quit. And the same people who were mad at me that I quit were the people who were eating my scholarship.
Yeah.
And
They didn't know.
They didn't freaking know. I only told one girl. And she was super awesome, sweetest girl in the world. I just knew that I could trust her because she had a really good heart.
Yeah, because you can't let that get out.
Yeah. And so it's like, and I knew she would understand. And so I said, don't tell anybody, but this is the truth. This is why I'm leaving. And I said, so I'm saying goodbye. Give her a hug and walked away. I never saw her again.
At least you had one person that you could be honest with.
Yeah.
Because that helps.
And it was rough.
Yeah, that helps.
You know, it was just absolutely rough. But the victory that came from this, so that was a track and field thing. So when I went back to Florida, it's actually, believe it or not, I'm not going to go down that path. But how I met Joe, ironically, I met Joe's organization that year, which is crazy, in Tennessee. And then 6 years later, when I met Jason, I was pretty much reintroduced to Joe again, which is insane.
So
wow.
There was
crazy how it all came together.
It all came
together.
It
was crazy. So like that, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. But when I went back to Florida, I lost my Bright Future Scholarship because I went to an NAI school, a private school, pretty much out of Florida. So I lost my Florida scholarship. So then I lost my schooling completely. So I had to leave Bright Futures and my schooling. And then I lost, my girlfriend and I broke up, and I was living at her house because there's trauma that I experienced at my house, and it was illegal for me to live there because some stuff went down and cops got involved and I couldn't live there. And so then I lost my house when I broke up, when my girlfriend and I broke up, and then both my jobs let me go. My family turned their back on me, and track and field was my identity, was gone. All that in 30 days.
Wow.
So I went from on top of the world to homeless in 30 days.
That is
18 years old.
Crazy.
Family dropped me off, left me, gone. Dude, figure it out. I have too much going on in my life right now. I can't handle this right now, and I don't actually blame them. And I was a lot of the problem. I'm the one who sacrificed a lot of those relationships because of what Zach wanted. I was that person. I know who I can be. I know I have teeth, but I choose not to be. But I still channel that. But I had to learn that. Hit rock bottom. A couple months later, that's when I found the underground, right?
Jeez.
That was another level. And I kept going down. And it was on November 14th, 2012. I remember exactly where I was, the time I was, 11:06. And I hit my knees on the ground. And I said, if God is real, the greatest thing that ever happened to me, which happened for me, okay? This is for all my little, there's a difference between Christians and believers, okay? Believers is about relationship. Christians about religion. Big difference. Biblical too. Is that the greatest thing that I ever did was I questioned if God even existed, coming from a Christian background, which is a crazy story. Like the background, I can go down that path. It's wild. I saw the evidence of God, but I didn't see him in my life because I was losing everything. At this point, I was homeless, and then I moved in with my brother, and then I had to sell my car. So then I lost my car, and then I pretty much ran away from that situation, and I went to go live with my grandfather, and I was finally at rock bottom. It was pretty rough. And I said, God, if you're real, tomorrow I have to feel different. Like, you have to show up in my life. I remember going to bed that day or that night, and I remember when I laid down in bed, dude, it was so weird. It was like I can see myself floating, and it was like these rays of energy that were leaving my body, floating and drifting into space, and I could feel my body doing this. And I was so content with suicide that it's not even a consideration. It was a genuine, if I don't, I will. I finally reached my maximum. And I remember falling asleep and drifting away, and I was the first one off Skyway Bridge. Easily. And it wasn't that I was excited for it, but I almost looked forward to the next chapter, whatever that would be. I'm about to find out. And I was ready. I was ready to go. And I woke up. Strangest thing. I can't explain it any other way. And only 10 years later, I could actually define it and know what it was. I felt like something when I woke up the next morning, like a little block. Place like right here. And it was weird. I woke up and I was like, man, like, I don't know. I couldn't explain it, but I just kind of sensed something was there. And at the time I was working at a steakhouse in Tampa, and I would walk to work. Didn't have a car, didn't have a phone, didn't have anything. Didn't have a laptop, I eventually got a bike, I bought a Mongoose bike for $35 on OfferUp. I think it was not even OfferUp. It was Craigslist back then. Right. And, but I would walk to work, and I was a busboy and a barback, and I couldn't finish a sentence. I mean, guys would be like, hey, Zach, what's up? I'd be like, yeah, yesterday. I'm like, man, I could not finish. It was a weird, and they would look at me like, the heck did he just, like, what?
Yeah.
That was weird. And then they would keep going because they know I'm articulate, because they know I do talk, and they know that that's who I am. It's kind of weird. It's like, this guy's on drugs. He's drunk.
Yeah.
And throughout the day, I couldn't finish a sentence. And I knew from that day forward, something did change. I was so distracted with the fact that I couldn't finish and complete a sentence that it literally, the frustration and the embarrassment of me not allowing me to finish my sentences literally kept me alive, because it distracted me from the pain. The embarrassment of not being able to communicate. And this is what I learned many years later, is that what started first? I'm going to ask you a question. Images or words?
What started first? Images.
Images. I thought it was words. It's images. You're right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You thought it was words.
I thought it was words when I first was introduced to this idea.
Uh-huh.
And so there's an image inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if I were to, and I use my words, taking action, right? There's something inside of me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to take action, which is using my mouth to speak and vocalize and use these words to speak it into the universe. Okay, you ready? I'm thinking of a dog, right? A black dog. And this dog is a lab, actually. And it has one eye, 3 legs, and is running across an open field. Okay? As I started to articulate and paint that picture, what happened was maybe the dog, when I said there's a dog, maybe looked a little bit different than the one that I said when I said there's a black dog. It changed the shape of what was inside of you. And the more I use my words, I begin to articulate something. And now I painted a picture inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
And when the picture is the same picture inside of me, using my words is now the same image and picture inside of you, we're in agreement.
Yeah.
And that's what amen means. Amen means agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in agreement. We have common ground. Now we can take it to higher ground.
Mm-hmm.
These are the principles that Joe taught me.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned was I was using my mouth and my voice and what God gave me, the ability to take my emotions and my thoughts, which is also came from my father. I learned that from him during that conversation. Actually, it's crazy. I'm just thinking about it now.
Mm-hmm.
My dad told me one of his gifts is taking those words and emotions and putting them into words. And that painted my dream. I'm like, man, I can do that too.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's our common ground. And that's why we took it to higher ground.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, then I began to not speak, because all I would do when I spoke was produce the life that I created, and almost committed suicide. I created that. I isolated myself completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to relearn how to create everything from the inside out. That's when life began.
Mm.
That's when awareness began. And there's a whole crazy story that comes with that. But that's where the awareness aspect started to come in, and I began to question things because I couldn't articulate things. And I started to draw. And I have these crazy drawings. They're very dark drawings, but these were expressions because I didn't know how to express myself. So I began drawing, and I created these drawings and stuff. And so maybe I'll share that with you. And if you want to throw it on, a podcast, whatever it is, and stuff like that, just started to create these things.
Interesting.
And this was my creative outlet. And I would listen to music, and music was a volume that I can trust because it wouldn't backstab me. I knew what was coming next. And so I started using this as a volume to increase the frequency of my mind and my creative capacity, and start drawing these things. And then it was an expression of who I was, and it got me to the next day. Right? This is what carried me through the process. Right? And then that's when I moved to West Palm, and that's where that journey began.
That's the West Palm journey. And then this journey is this is clearly pre-Ave Lux, but so you're not in the health and wellness space.
Not yet.
This is not. Okay.
No, sir.
So you move here. This is 10 years ago?
10 years ago, from almost this day.
Wow. Okay. So talk me through now what happened. So you moved to West Palm.
Moved to West Palm.
How does it end you
Here?
Here.
Sure. Well, I'll start in West Palm. When I moved to
yeah.
West Palm, it's a place called Pershing Suites. Pershing Suites is a place where it was $500 to live there. It's like this little place. It's probably about as big as this. It's probably about 100, 200 square feet.
Uh-huh.
And if you open up the door, you pretty much hit the bed. The bed was right there. There's my bathroom and shower, which is about this big.
Oh,
and the
wow.
shower is a little bit larger than this. This is my bathroom and shower. And I had a desk right here, and I had a kitchen over there. And it was rat infested, cockroaches. It was absolutely disgusting, to a point where this is where people would die and they were forgotten about because they didn't have anybody else in their life, and they would just rot. I remember walking in, and it was like a sour smell for like 3 days. And I found out that some guy died and no one came to get him, and he had no correlation with anybody. Very drug infested kind of situation. And so that's where I started. And so I would walk to work.
And what was work?
The gym.
Okay,
So I would walk a mile to work. And so I would walk, it'd be nasty as heck. I didn't have the clothes. I didn't have any money. I didn't have anything. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have any of these things. I think by that time I had a phone, and I did buy a laptop at that time as well, but I didn't have anything else. And so I would walk to work. And so eventually I would walk to work because it's so nasty and sweaty. I learned as I shadowed this trainer, this business owner, and learned from him, and he took me under his wing. I began to shadow him and stuff like that, but I would show up to work really smelly because all these people are Palm Beachers. And so then I had to carry 2 bags of clothes, but what if it rained? So then I had to carry 3 bags of clothes, and I had nowhere to do laundry. So then I had to figure it out. So I had a time when I was leaving, when I was going, how early I had to go, all these different things, and this is my life. And then one client saw me and felt bad and said, hey, I have like 7 different bikes. The cheapest one's like $1,500. The most expensive is like $9,000. And he showed me all the bikes, and he's like, I got these as gifts. And so I just want to give you this bike so I can get to and from work. And so one day I'm riding my bike to work, and I got this really good, weird gut feeling, 7 o'clock in the morning. I was like, man, when I get up to this certain point, I'm going to get hit by a car. I'm going to get T-boned. Sure enough, man, I embraced it, and I looked over. Dude, this car he blew through the first stop sign, the second, or the first like stop. The second one was like an extended sidewalk, and he hit me in midair because I hit my brakes. I flipped over, hit me, spun me around, boom, hit the ground. And I remember like just laying there, and the guy keeps driving. He goes, hey, are you okay? And I said, I guess. Like I was so in shock. I looked up, I saw the car, he got in the car, drove away. I wasn't late though. I still got to work on time.
Oh my God.
Went to work. A couple of days later, because of that incident, I was advised by one of the lawyers that were trained at the gym that, hey, after a couple of days, see how your body feels, you might have to go to chiropractic. And so I went to a chiropractor across on Palm Beach that another client of mine, his name is James, and he referred me to him. And I went into the office, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. It's really my first time on Palm Beach Island, and I'm being serviced here. I'm like, this is nuts. Second wealthiest zip code on the planet, or in the country, and number 1 place for trust funds. Second trust funds in the country is in the world for trust fund money. And so I'm sitting there at the chiropractic, Bebiatsky, and I asked him, I said, hey man, like you're the only chiropractic here on Palm Beach Island, and you always have been. I said, how did you give me advice, like help me, like. And I think he saw a little version of him inside of me. And he said, Zach, here's the thing. Best advice. He says, if you take their first 100 clients, if you treat them like kings and queens, they'll take care of you for the rest of your life. Walked out. Pretty much never saw him again.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the entrepreneurial path.
That's gold.
And so what happened was over the course of time and how we got here into this gym is that I began to seek out people who were really great at what they did. Thankfully, all the clients had a form of success. And so I began to pick their minds and learn from them. And I then started getting certifications. And then I started growing and stuff like that. And it was a process. I had mental breakdowns. I was mentally, screwed. I mean, it was bad. I mean, it was like really bad. It was like crying in the gym lobby, bawling my eyes out, just having a mental, having all the pressure on me. Right? There was times where I was being booted from my place, and my dad says, hey son, I love you. You're going to survive. You're going to be okay. And walks away. And so and then that's what happened. And so I've had family do the same thing. It's just been rough. And so there's been times where I've been booted from places where I literally had no money, and we figured it out. That's the reality. And that my dad was a little tough on me, a little tough love. But the reality, a little bit, but look, we survived. And so that's the thing, you figure things out. And so over the course of years, I actually left the fitness industry. Okay. 2 things. 1, everyone that I worked for owned something. They were a business owner or owned assets of some sort. 2, financially independent. And I realized the vehicle that I was in did not have the capacity to produce the results and lifestyle that I wanted to live. Here's the thing. Mind-boggling. Joe. First conversation. Zach, when you choose what you do as an occupation, you don't get to choose the outcome. When you choose what you do, there's a lifestyle already attached to it. Example, you're a personal trainer, Zach. Say you make $50,000 a year. When you make $50,000 a year, you're probably not going to go to Morton Steakhouse on a Tuesday in the middle of the day because you make $50,000 a year. You're probably going to live close to 995 so you can get to work on time. You're probably going to drive a Nissan like I do today and not a Bugatti or a Bentley or something that's nicer. Not saying those things are what people want, but the point is that there's a lifestyle attached to it. It doesn't have the capacity to produce a certain lifestyle. All occupations, when you choose what you do. He says, Zach, but here's the thing. Reverse engineer. He says, we're going to start with the end in mind. He said, Zach, how do you want to live? I'll see you in 24 hours. And so a couple of days later, he comes back and he says, how do you want to live? And it was paragraphs long. There was not a job description. There was not paragraphs long. What do you want to do? How do you want to live? How do you want to wake up? Who do you want to wake up with? Where do you want to wake up? Do you want to bring on friends? What do you want to do? How long do you want to do it for? Do you want to go on the boat? How do you want to live your life? I began to draw this out, began to expand my dream, and really take the time to actually genuinely do this. He says, Zach, if you choose how you want to live, you don't get to choose what you do. You have to choose what you do, whatever produces that result. And if that vehicle, business, whatever you decide to do, cannot produce, you'll never live that lifestyle. So you have to choose the vehicle to produce that lifestyle. You have two ways to live your life. It is a personal decision. What do you want to do or how do you want to live your life? The entrepreneurial path went from I'm a personal trainer to a business owner as an entrepreneurial path because how I wanted to live my life was different. And what I was currently doing wasn't working. And so I get a phone call. I'm kind of going back and forth in time, but I get a phone call. I'm training a guy. He's at Rybovich. Rybovich, I think, is like you can only have a ship. It's over 195 feet. You can't park it in Palm Beach. And he had 36 people working for him, Italian guy. I won't say his name. And his physician ended up giving the gym a call. I pick up the phone, which I never do during the training session, but I did at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And he says, is so-and-so there? I said, yes. He says, well, I'm their physician. I'm from Italy. And here's the thing. If they don't work out, he ain't going to make it. This man has a lifestyle better than Instagram wish they can get access to, and they would never. They do renderings of this man's boat and lifestyle, okay? He has everything in the world. Third marriage, no relationship with his kids. I don't think he made it. That scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
See, we're motivated to move forward with things. Our goals are great, but I also have not goals or never goals. I would never live paycheck to paycheck again. I'd never want to live like that individual. I don't want to sacrifice my whole life on the altar of business.
Right.
Sort of painting me in the direction of where I'm going to go today. So I left the industry. I went to restaurant industry, worked with Kimmy. Crazy story. Long story short, that was my platform to begin business ownership and entrepreneurship. So I actually was a manager of a restaurant.
Yep.
At his expense to run the company, essentially. He taught me entrepreneurship, resourcefulness, etc. I moved up to North Carolina. At the time, I was dating a girl. Her dad owned a landscape company. And I'll just say it very briefly, is that he was not who he said he was and stole a lot of money. And so I branched off from that while I was dating his niece, who I was going to get married to at the time. That wasn't a lot of wisdom. Definitely didn't want that lifestyle. And therefore, I met Joe. And Joe put me on the right path. And I realized if I want to help and develop assets and build assets long term, I need to have stable income. I can't be doing a hardscaping business. So I moved back down to Florida, 26 years old, restarting my life again, living on my mom's couch. Living on my mom's couch, sold my PS4 so I could attend an event that I couldn't even get to and I didn't even qualify for that he put on in December. And I was so frustrated, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so my mom ended up getting to a point where she knew one of her employees had a house, and I rented a room there. And the first day I moved to West Palm, I met Holly. She's the first soul that I ever saw.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, who's going to be my wife.
Yeah.
We'll get married here in spring, summer. And that's when I met her. The day I met her, we started dating. And she knows the whole process. And so I suffered, and I went through the worst financial year. It's so uncomfortable. Worked 4 different jobs. It was insane. It was 24 hours around the clock. It was nuts. And so I then became a personal trainer. I started getting more clients. I was working at the restaurant. I was valeting at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I was working as a personal trainer, but I had to get all my own clients.
Yeah.
For the most part. So I put in the time at the gym and wait there so a client walks into the door, and hopefully I was giving that client so they can build a relationship. I was doing all those things. And I was building assets outside of that in another industry. And so eventually got to a point where I was making enough money in personal training where I stepped away from the restaurant, stepped away from valet first, and then the restaurant, and then full-time personal training. Personal training, and this is where I'm going to conclude to, is personal training. Then it got to a point where I was working for this individual, and let's just say I didn't agree with how things were done administrative-wise, and personally and professionally, et cetera. And so I left, and I went to work at another person who actually we both started together at this gym. He branched off, and then I eventually went over. And so we had an agreement about things when I moved over, and about not even a year into it, he went against that agreement, and I branched off. Now, here's what's crazy. I had to rebuild my business 3 times. I'm going to be very transparent about this. The first time is when I first moved back to West Palm. One time. I decided not to get the COVID vaccine, just for my personal opinion. Okay, that's number 2. So a lot of my clients, $90,000, walked away. After my worst financial year of my life, I was willing to walk away from it. Now, not because it was the right decision getting the vaccine or not vaccine. It was standing on what I believe.
Yeah, your belief system is the most important thing.
Most important thing. You don't sacrifice yourself to do that, regardless if you get it or didn't. I know people who should have, and I'm glad they did. I know people who should have, they didn't. I know people who did, and they regret it.
Of course.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is I stood on what I believed. So that was that. That was the second time. The third time is that when I started working at this other gym, he pretty much put a contract that I could not sign because it went against my values, and I think I expressed that. And that was the third time. Lost my business again. Here's the thing. There is not a gym in sight now to be able to do anything. And now I was figuring it out. There's not a gym to bring my clients. My clients did everything for me. They fought for me, bro. I owe them everything. Hey, you know what? Charge me $150 an hour. You're going to show up to my house on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're going to walk on the beach, and every other day we're going to go to Planet Fitness. By the way, I'm the #1 financial advisor for American Express on the planet. And I live in a $45 million home, and we're going to pull up in my Porsche when we go to Planet Fitness. I don't care about that. I care about you, Zach. I appreciate you. I had other clients who did the exact same thing. They did whatever they took to take care of me because they knew not what I believed in, but that they believed in me and they loved me and they wanted to be with me as a trainer. And so during this time of figuring this out, which is the most stressful thing, 19 trainers signed, or not 19, about 10 of them signed the contract. I just could not do it, right? They're shocked that I left. And I dipped out and I left on class terms. I would not be, he threatened me. So I would not be threatened. I do not tolerate that. I said, money is not my God. And you owe me a 1099 at the end of the year, March. And I walked away from the business. He said, if you don't sign, then blah. I said, okay, then I quit. You don't threaten me, bro. You do not threaten me. I would never subordinate my name to another man, period. I am the king of my domain. Do you understand that? There's principle and values that I would never put a jersey on my back with someone else's name. It will never happen. I'm not in part of that arena. Not saying that's bad. I love sports, by the way, as an athletic guy, right? I own a gym. I'm all about it. But there's something about certain things that I do not stand on that are just, in my opinion, I don't do. This all generated to a point where I'm sitting in the square, still trying to figure things out, bouncing all over the place, sleepless nights, it was insane. Everyone thinks I was nuts. And I get a call randomly from a guy named Nathan, my business partner. Now, Nathan and I met. He was 525 pounds, lost 316 pounds in this gym that we're standing in 2 years. When I met him, he was 209, 1%. He was in the single-digit body fat. He never told me this story until after we got into business, after we signed contracts. I never knew this stuff. It was insane. So him and I stay connected because at the original gym that I first moved over from Tampa to West Palm when I was working there, he was there. We got connected. I got his number. And for 3 years, when I left that gym, it was 3 years. Bro, I didn't talk to the man for 3 years. He randomly gives me a call. Okay? On, I think I have the dates, like April 16th or something like that. I remember all the dates. Super cool. I remember all the texts. We celebrated. We went out to dinner and stuff like that. It was awesome this year. And he said, hey, man, I know I've offered different business positions to you before. I want to offer or put something on the table as an opportunity, not a business position. I said, okay, I'm open. And we sat down, and we're now standing in Ave Lux Gym.
Wow, that's crazy.
So he bought the entire plaza, 10,000 square feet, bought the business itself, and I was already partnered with 3 other of my clients who also were potentially, but were kind of fiddling with some ideas, playing with some ideas to potentially open up a gym in the West Palm Beach area. And then he gives me a call. Dude, 3 years I haven't talked to this guy.
Yeah.
And he puts a gym in my lap.
So crazy.
Because I stood on what I believed.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So when I say you're taking action on faith, you're standing in the manifestation of something that I believed I sacrificed everything for 3 times. I'm on my 4th up and rising. Now I'm building the gym. I've been here 5 years. I've built my business 4 times. I've been tested in ways that I never thought I'd be imagined. Backstabbed by my best friend. Backstabbed, not backstabbed, but just gone back on word and change of position, and good thing you're doing your business. That's how you want to run it. That's fine. It's not good with me. Stood on what I believed. And then when you talk about, Zach, you now have the things because you sacrificed and therefore you have today. Yeah. And here's the key. I'm the one who put this together. I genuinely believe because I stayed true to my faith while taking action on what I believe and the image that was put inside of me, because Joe poured into me and Kimmy poured into me, all these people changed my self-image, and something started to create. I never wanted to open a gym. I then realized I need to open a gym when someone pulled that BS contract on me and said, if you don't sign, I own everything you have that you built for 10 years. I said, the answer is no. I said, and you're making that move because you're the only gym in the region? I said, absolutely not. It ain't happening, dude. I said, we're not doing this. I said, you know what? I said this to him. I said, dude, I sacrificed the situation for a relationship. I'd rather keep the relationship. He's a good dude. I just didn't agree with his method. He's not a bad person. What broke my heart the most is I admired him. He was my top 4 or 5 people that I admired the most. It hurt. It's not he's a bad person. If we go out to dinner, I go out to dinner with him today. He's a super cool dude. Brilliant, by the way. Unbelievably brilliant. Like, I can go on forever. I admired this person. I wanted to be like him. He was there for me through some of the worst things. And it just, our visions were different.
Yeah.
And so I genuinely believe, because I stayed true to my faith, to what it is that I believe that was spoken into me, right? Now this is a physical manifestation of what it is. Nathan would just probably maybe look at it a completely different perspective. He doesn't maybe see it the same way. He just saw it as a business opportunity. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I know for my life, this is what it created into. You're now standing in the manifestation of something that I genuinely believe that because I stayed true, God honored me.
Yeah.
Through the struggle, oh man, I can't explain the resistance. I'm skipping story after story.
No, I know,
resistance
because
to get to where
otherwise
we're
we're
at
going to
today.
be, because we're that I can only imagine how much you've skipped, but we still got so much.
Yeah. No, we'd be here for days. But
Well, you wouldn't change a thing, would you? Or maybe in your case you would. I don't know. Usually when I ask this question as a final kind of,
Yeah.
a couple questions I ask at the end where,
you know what I learned? I went back to my roots when I was 12 years old, where I gained all that weight, back to my neighborhood in December before we opened up in January, a couple of days later, on Christmas by myself. Drove out there all the way to Tampa, and I went to the courts where I built myself. And I did a conversation with myself. And it was 8 minutes and 1 second. My birthday's on August 1st. That was kind of cool. The conversation with myself was very simple. You were right, Zach. All those mistakes, you were on the right path the entire time.
Yeah.
You were on the right. All those mistakes led me to where I am today. You were right. And I just gave grace to my younger self. All the fuck-ups that I did my whole life, it led me to where I'm at still to this day.
Yeah.
And even though you made the wrong decision, in the end you were right, because it still led to something beautiful in the end.
Because you didn't stop. Because you didn't stop. You didn't stop believing. You kept faith.
I just
Almost lost it.
Dude, just take
but you
action
kept it.
on what you believe, and take action against the thing you fear.
Yeah.
The other, as a byproduct
Say that
of
one more time so that people can hear that.
Sure.
Take action on. Say that.
You take action on what you believe,
Take action on what you believe.
and take action on what you fear. That's it. The description of action on what you believe is not giving up. But if I focus on not giving up, that won't lead me to taking action on what I fear.
Right.
So two different things.
Sure.
You can have one without the other. Walk in faith, bro. Bro, that's it.
Let
Walk in
fear
faith.
move you forward.
Faith. Faith it till you make it.
Faith it
Not
till you
not
make
fake it. You faith it.
Faith
You take
it
action.
till you make
Because
it.
think about it. Action on what you believe is in the future. That's a vision of what you believe. When you take action, even though you're not there yet, you're still. That's what faith is. People take action. They have faith in a whole bunch of other things. They just don't know what faith is.
Yes.
Once I learned what faith is, oh man, it changed the game.
Unbelievable. Well, if you want to check out Ave Lux Gym, if you want to train with one of the incredible trainers at this gym, if you want to peer into this man's mind, into this man's soul, and learn from this man, we'll put all the info down below. I loved this conversation, man. I loved everything about this conversation. Thank you so much. I got to get up and give you a pound. Appreciate you. That was unbelievable. Thank you all for joining. My name is Paul Masters. This is the Growth to Greatness podcast. Zechariah, Ave Lux Gym. This guy has been through it all, and I'm inspired. I want to go do something. I'm ready to go. I think everybody around here is also really inspired. So thanks again for the time, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.
All right.